Hey guys, tonight, we dive into a story that's not just haunting, it's chilling in a way that'll linger with you long after the lights are out. A place where children vanish without a trace, and the whispers of the past echo in the quietest corners. This isn't the kind of tale you want to hear if you're alone, especially after midnight. But you're here now. And once you've heard it, you'll wish you'd never come this far. You probably won't survive this. But I guess that's part of the fun, isn't it? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It was a small village, tucked away at the edge of a dense forest. Most people who passed through never gave it much thought, too focused on the road that led them out of it. But for the few who chose to stay, the village was more than just a place, it was a secret. One that whispered its story on the wind between the rustling of the trees and the creaking of old wooden houses. The missing children weren't just a legend. They were a fact, a dark truth that everyone in the village knew, but no one talked about. Eva had lived there her entire life, born and raised in a house that had stood for generations, watching the village from her bedroom window. She had always found comfort in the way the wind would howl through the trees at night, the distant sound of the river running like a lullaby. But recently something had changed. The wind didn't sound the same. It had a new, more haunting quality to it. The first disappearance had occurred long before Eva's birth, a boy named Lucas, only 5 years old. His parents swore that he had been playing near the woods when he simply vanished. No screams, no signs of a struggle, just gone. And then, a few months later, another child went missing, and then another. Each time the villagers searched, but all they found were the same cold winds and empty forest. And then, as quickly as the disappearances had begun, they stopped. But no one could forget what had happened. No one ever spoke of it openly, but the shadows in the eyes of the older villagers told a different story. Eva's grandmother was one of those villagers who never spoke of the past, but there were nights when she would sit on the porch, staring into the darkening trees, as though listening to a voice only she could hear. There are things in those woods, she would say, her voice low and careful things that no one should ever disturb. Eva never quite understood what her grandmother meant. After all, the village was peaceful. Or at least it appeared to be. The children who lived there seemed to play and laugh, just like any other kids, and life carried on as usual. That was until the day Eva's own little brother Max disappeared. It happened late one afternoon, the kind where the sky is painted with streaks of orange and purple, and the air feels thick with the promise of rain. Eva had been inside finishing her homework while Max was out playing in the yard. She had called to him once, twice, each time hearing only the faintest rustle of the trees in the breeze. But by the third time when she went to check, he was gone. Just like that, Eva ran out into the yard calling his name, her heart pounding in her chest. But there was no response. The sound of her voice seemed to vanish as quickly as it left her lips. She ran to the edge of the forest where the trees loomed like silent sentinels. "Max," she shouted, her voice trembling with fear. But there was no answer, not even the whisper of the wind to reassure her. She had no choice but to run back to the village, yelling for help, her legs shaking beneath her. The villagers gathered quickly, and the search began. They combed through the woods, calling his name, but it was as if the forest had swallowed him whole. The hours dragged on, and as night began to fall, the villagers' faces grew darker with worry. It was the same fear that had gripped them all those years ago when the first child had gone missing. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, they had found nothing. No footprints, no signs of Max. It was as though he had simply disappeared into thin air. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Eva heard when she stood alone at the edge of the woods, clutching a lantern in her trembling hand. For just a moment, there was a sound, a soft, faint whisper, like a voice carried on the wind. Max. It called so quietly that she could barely hear it. Eva's breath caught in her throat, her body frozen in place. It wasn't a voice she recognized. It was something older, something darker, and it was coming from deep within the trees. She turned and ran, not stopping until she reached the heart of the village. The villagers had gathered in hushed groups, their faces filled with fear. They spoke in low tones, casting wary glances toward the forest. But Eva had heard something they hadn't. Later that night, as she lay in her bed, she heard the whispers again. This time they weren't distant. They were right outside her window, so close that she could almost feel the chill of the air. Max, the voice whispered, just barely audible over the wind. Max is coming. Eva squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the sound, but it wouldn't go away. It was as if someone was waiting for her, waiting for all of them to fall asleep so it could take what was left. She couldn't shake the feeling that Max wasn't gone. Not really, that something had taken him, and the forest was calling. The next morning, Eva could barely keep her eyes open. The whispers had kept her up for hours, and she hadn't even bothered to check the window when the sun started to rise. The fear that had settled in her chest the night before clung to her like a second skin, weighing her down with every step. It was a feeling she couldn't shake, not even when the other villagers gathered at the center of town, their voices hushed with dread. Eva knew what they were talking about. They were talking about Max. They were talking about what had happened, or rather what hadn't happened. There were no signs of him, no trace of his presence. And yet the whispering continued. Her grandmother's warnings echoed in her mind. There are things in those woods, things that no one should ever disturb. She could almost hear her voice, the gravity in each word. But it wasn't just the forest that made Eva uneasy. It was the village itself. The place that should have been safe, a place of comfort, now felt like a trap. The people who had grown up with her, the people she had known her entire life now, seemed like strangers' eyes avoiding hers, their movements sharp and calculated. There was a man named Peter who stood at the edge of the gathering. He had been the first to help during the search for Max, but now he stood silently, his eyes fixed on the woods. Eva didn't need to ask him what he was thinking. She already knew. Peter was one of the few who remembered the old disappearances. He had been a child when Lucas vanished, and though he had never spoken of it in detail, the way he would look at the forest eyes wide with unease spoke volumes. Eva, he said, his voice low, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. He motioned for her to step aside, pulling her gently away from the others. I need to show you something. It's not safe to stay here much longer. Eva's heart skipped a beat. Her mind screamed to ask him what he meant, but something in his expression told her it wasn't the time for questions. Not yet. Peter led her through the village, away from the others, toward the edge of the woods. There, just beyond the line of trees, was a small clearing, a place Eva had never noticed before. It was strange how the trees seemed to part in just the right way, as though they were hiding something. This is where it all began, Peter said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The first child disappeared here. Lucas. His parents never found him, no matter how hard they searched. They said it was the woods that took him, but they didn't understand. Eva's pulse quickened. There was something about the way Peter spoke that made her skin crawl, as if the very air around them was thick with history, with secrets that had been buried too long. The forest is alive. Peter continued, glancing nervously over his shoulder. It's not just trees and dirt. It's something older than any of us. It feeds on the children. And once it's tasted one, it won't stop until it gets another. Ava felt a chill sweep through her. Her eyes flicked nervously to the trees, their twisted limbs reaching toward the sky like skeletal hands. It was absurd, she thought. A forest alive. It didn't make sense. But there was something in Peter's voice, something in the way his hands trembled as he spoke, that made her wonder if there was more to his words than she wanted to admit. They say it starts with a voice, Peter murmured as if to himself. A soft whisper in the wind. It calls them deeper into the woods. And once they're in, they never come back. Ava swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy cloak. The wind shifted, rustling the leaves, and for a moment she thought she heard it, just a faint whisper, too soft to make out. But there, Max, Ava whispered almost against her will. Peter nodded grimly. That's how it starts. First the whispers, then the children are drawn in. They disappear. Just like Lucas, just like all the others. But why, Eva asked, her voice barely audible. Why them, why Max? Peter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow breath and looked around, his eyes darting back to the trees as if searching for something. Then his gaze shifted back to Eva. I don't know, he said quietly, but I think it's always been this way. Something ancient, something the village has always known about but never spoken of. I think the forest isn't just a place. It's a sentience, a hunger. Eva's stomach twisted. She didn't want to believe him. Didn't want to think that something so dark, so unnatural could exist right on the doorstep of the village she had always called home. But as she stood there staring into the depths of the trees, a feeling began to creep up her spine. The sense that she wasn't alone. Peter seemed to sense it too. His voice dropped to a near whisper. It's watching us. Listening. Eva stepped back, her heart racing. A cold gust of wind swept through the clearing, making the trees groan and sway. The whispering, it wasn't just in her head anymore. It was real. She could hear it, feel it all around her. It wasn't coming from the wind. It was coming from the forest itself. Max was out there, and whatever was waiting in the shadows of the trees was waiting for her too. Peter grabbed her arm suddenly, his grip firm but urgent. We need to go now, he said, his eyes wide with panic. But as Eva turned to leave, a sound echoed behind them, a faint, echoing laugh. It was soft, distant at first, but growing closer, sharper, as if it were following them. Eva's blood ran cold. She didn't dare look back. Instead, she ran, her feet pounding the ground as the forest seemed to close in around her, the whispers growing louder, more insistent, until they felt like they were in her very bones. Max was coming, but so was something else, something much older, and Eva knew deep in her soul that she wasn't going to survive this. Eva's breath came in ragged gasps as she and Peter ran through the clearing, the underbrush snapping beneath their feet, like the forest itself was reaching for them. The laughter behind them echoed again, louder this time, sharper. It was no longer just a distant sound. It felt as though it was right behind them, a twisted melody carried by the wind. Eva didn't dare look back, her heart hammering in her chest, as they pushed forward, the shadows of the trees swallowing them whole. Peter's grip tightened on her arm, urging her faster. Don't stop, he gasped. His voice strained. We have to get out of here. It's already started. Started? What do you mean? Eva's voice trembled, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Peter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, his face pale, eyes wide with terror. The forest doesn't just take the children. He said his words rushed as though he was trying to outrun the words themselves. It feeds on their fear, on their souls. But it needs something more, something else to keep it alive. Once it has its first taste, it doesn't let go. The whispers it calls the children lures them deeper, but when they disappear, they're not the only ones who vanish. Ava's mind struggled to keep up with his words, her body moving on autopilot, just trying to keep pace with his frantic steps. They reached the edge of the village, the path to her house just ahead, but the whispers, their voices kept pulling at her ears, the air thick with a presence she couldn't shake. The first time Lucas disappeared, people thought it was just an accident. Peter continued, his voice dropping lower as if afraid to be overheard. But it wasn't. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't want to say it aloud. They didn't want to believe that the village was cursed. But I think they knew, we all knew, that once the forest tasted a soul, it wouldn't stop. Eva's feet faltered as her house came into view, but something held her in place. She looked back at the trees. The whispering was louder now, almost deafening. It felt like the very forest was trying to consume her, pull her back into its endless maw. "Peter," she whispered, her voice cracking. "What do we do now?" Peter stopped, turning to face her with a look in his eyes that Eva had never seen before, a mix of regret, fear, and something darker. "You have to listen to me, Eva," he said. "You have to stay away from the woods, from everything in there. It's not just the children it wants all of us." The wind picked up again, and Eva could feel the cold prickling at the back of her neck. She had a sudden sense that they were not alone. Something was watching them. Something more than just the forest. Something in the distance, just beyond the trees. The faint laugh rang out again, closer this time, and this time it sounded like a child. "Max." The name hit Eva like a physical blow, her heart constricting painfully in her chest. Her brother wasn't just lost in the woods, he was part of it now. The thing that had taken him wasn't finished. It wanted more. "Max," Eva whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and dread. "I have to find him. I have to save him." Peter's face twisted in anguish. "You don't understand. It's too late. The forest has him. It won't give him back. And if you go in there, you'll be taken too. There's no coming back." Eva shook her head, her mind spiraling. "There's no way I can let him go. I can't lose him. Not like this." The trees seemed to bend toward her, their branches creaking and groaning, as if they were alive, reaching for her. The whispers grew louder still, almost a chant, now calling her name, calling Max's. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught her eye, something small darting between the trees. Her heart leapt in her chest. "Max!" she cried out, taking a step forward, her instincts screaming at her to go after him. But Peter grabbed her arm, yanking her back with surprising strength. "No!" he shouted, his voice desperate. "You can't go. It's not him. It's something else." But it was too late. Eva wrenched free from his grip, her heart pounding in her chest as she ran toward the forest. Her feet barely touched the ground as she sprinted into the trees, the shadows closing in around her, the whispers growing deafening, almost overwhelming. The laughter came again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just the soft, teasing laugh of a child. It was twisted, contorted, as if the very sound of it was writhing in pain. Eva's breath came in ragged gasps, her mind a haze of terror and determination. "I have to save him. I have to find him before it's too late." As she ran deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser, blocking out the light, casting everything in an eerie twilight. The ground beneath her feet was soft and uneven, like it was shifting with every step, pulling her deeper into the darkness. The whispering was louder now, closer, as if it were all around her, filling her ears with 1,000 voices. "Max!" she shouted again, her voice raw, her chest tight with fear. "Max, please answer me." But there was nothing, no response, just the whispering and the laughter. Eva's legs began to tire, her body aching with the effort, but she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. Not until she found him. And then through the fog of fear and confusion, she saw it, a figure standing in the distance just beyond the reach of the trees. It was small, hunched over, and moving slowly toward her. "Max." She breathed, her heart racing. She reached out, desperate to run toward him, but something held her in place. A force. An invisible weight pressing against her chest. The figure turned to face her, and Ava's blood ran cold. It wasn't Max. It was something else. Something that looked like him, but wasn't. Its eyes were hollow black pits, and its smile was wide, too wide. It didn't belong in the world of the living. The laughter came again, louder now, filling her ears, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, as if the very earth was alive, reaching for her. And then she understood. The forest didn't just take the children. It became them. Ava's scream echoed through the trees as the figure began to move toward her, its smile widening even further. She had made a terrible mistake, and now there was no turning back. Ava stumbled back, her legs shaking beneath her, as the figure slowly, deliberately stepped closer. It moved in a way that was unnatural, its limbs jerking with each step, like it was trying to force itself into a shape it wasn't meant to take. The thing that resembled Max, if only by the faintest shadow of recognition, grinned wider, its dark eyes unblinking, fixed on her. The wind howled, the whispering rising to a crescendo, a maddening symphony of voices that seemed to come from everywhere surrounding her, in the thick, oppressive air of the forest. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. All she could do was stare at the creature that now stood before her, so close she could feel the chill of its breath, a stifling cold that seeped into her very bones. "Max," she whispered again, this time, not with hope, but with the horror of understanding. This wasn't her brother. This wasn't Max at all. The thing that mimicked him tilted its head, the grin never faltering. "Max is gone," it whispered, the voice a twisted mockery of her brother's. It was too soft, too smooth a sound that slipped beneath her skin like poison. Max was never meant to stay. He belongs to the forest now, like all the others. Eva recoiled, her hands trembling as she wiped the cold sweat from her brow. "No," she gasped, shaking her head violently. "You're not him. You're not him." The figure's grin stretched wider, impossibly wide, until its mouth almost touched its ears. The edges of its lips cracked and bleeding. "Oh, I'm him," it hissed, stepping closer, until its face was just inches from hers. "I'm all of them. All the children the forest took. We're all part of it now." Ava's heart pounded in her chest, the blood rushing in her ears. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, but her legs felt frozen, rooted to the spot. She couldn't move, couldn't tear her eyes away from the thing that wore her brother's face, her brother's voice. The forest had claimed him, twisted him, made him a part of its insatiable hunger. The figure reached out a hand, its fingers long and spindly, almost skeletal, like a tree branch bent in a cruel, unnatural shape. "You're next," it whispered, its voice trailing off into a low, mocking giggle. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Her mind spun. She had to get away. She had to save herself. But how? How could she outrun something that already had its claws in her, that had taken her brother and so many others before him? And then, as if the forest itself was closing in on her, she heard something else, a rustling in the trees behind her. She turned her eyes wide with terror. Something was moving toward her. Something fast. Something alive, like the very woods were coming to claim her. A shape emerged from the darkness. At first it was just a silhouette, but then it became clearer. Peter running toward her, his face pale with fear, his eyes wild. He reached her just as the creature took another step forward, its twisted smile still stretching unnaturally wide. "Ava, no!" Peter shouted, grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her. "You have to listen. Don't look at it. It's not him. It's never him." But Ava couldn't look away. The thing that had been Max was too close. Its distorted grin too much, too overwhelming. It was as if it was trying to break her will, to drag her down into the depths of the forest's twisted embrace. Peter's grip tightened, his voice desperate. "Ava, listen to me." He pulled her roughly away from the creature, dragging her toward the path they had run earlier. The whispers grew louder as they moved, like the entire forest was rising up against them, trying to pull them back. "No!" Ava cried out, her voice a strangled sob. "I have to go back. I have to find Max." Peter pulled harder, his muscles straining with the effort. "No, you don't. You don't understand. He's gone. There's nothing left in there for you, Ava. Nothing but them." Ava tried to fight him to break free, but the more she struggled, the more the air around her thickened, the whispers growing louder, until they felt like they were inside her mind, inside her very soul. They were all around her now, the lost children, their voices echoing through the trees. She heard them calling to her, Max's voice soft and pleading, mixed with the others. "Help us," they cried. "Help us escape." Peter's face was inches from hers now, his eyes desperate, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You can't save him," he whispered. "And you can't save yourself if you keep listening to them." Ava trembled, her tears blurring her vision. The creature that had been Max was still standing at the edge of the clearing, its eyes fixed on her with that same eerie, hollow stare. And then, as she watched in horror, it shifted, its body twitching, writhing, as if it couldn't hold its form any longer. It broke apart, its limbs stretching unnaturally, its body twisting in ways that should not have been possible. The scream that erupted from it wasn't a child's cry. It was a thing of agony, of torment, a sound that made Eva's heart twist in her chest. The figure began to melt the skin, ripping away in long, ragged strips, revealing nothing but the dark, oozing shadow underneath. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone, swallowed whole by the forest. Eva stood there, her body shaking, her mind racing. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Peter stepped back, looking at her with a sorrowful expression. They can't be saved. Not now. The forest doesn't let go. It keeps them, makes them part of it. And it always wants more. Eva collapsed to her knees, her sobs breaking through the quiet of the woods. The realization hit her like a freight train. Max was lost, truly lost. And no matter what she did, she would never get him back. Peter crouched beside her, placing a hand on her trembling shoulder. "It's not over yet," he said softly. "But you have to stay strong. We have to leave this place." Eva shook her head, her hands clutching at her chest. "I can't leave him there. I can't just forget him." Peter's gaze hardened, and he stood, offering his hand to her. "We don't have a choice." And as Eva took his hand, she could feel the forest watching them, waiting, always, waiting for the next soul to claim. Ava's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, spinning so fast she could barely catch a breath. The moment her hand touched Peter's, something heavy and suffocating settled over her chest. The forest seemed to pulse, the trees bending toward them, as if reaching with thin skeletal fingers. She didn't want to leave. She couldn't leave. But the stark, painful reality gripped her. The forest had claimed Max, and it wasn't finished yet. It would never be finished. The whispering had faded, but the weight of it lingered heavy in the air around them. As Peter gently guided her away from the clearing, she kept her eyes fixed ahead, unable to look back. Every step felt like a betrayal, each one pulling her further away from her brother, from the memory of him that still clung to her. The air was thick, laden with the remnants of the thing that had once been Max. She could almost feel its twisted presence lingering behind them, watching, waiting. Peter's grip tightened as they walked, his face set in a grim line. "Stay close," he murmured, glancing nervously at the shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe in the corners of her vision. "We're not safe yet." Eva barely heard him. She couldn't focus on anything but the emptiness inside her, the hollow place where Max had once been. She wanted to scream, to tear through the forest, and demand that it give him back. But deep down, she knew it was pointless. The forest wasn't just a place. It was a force. It was alive, hungry, and it would never let go. They walked in silence, the crunch of their footsteps, the only sound that broke the eerie quiet. The deeper they moved into the forest, the more oppressive it became. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches, like outstretched arms casting long, twisted shadows on the ground. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, as though the forest itself was warping time, trapping them in its suffocating embrace. Eva couldn't remember how long they had been walking. Hours, maybe days. It didn't matter. Time had stopped existing for her the moment Max had disappeared into the woods. She was numb each step, feeling like it was carrying her further into a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Peter glanced back at her, his eyes filled with concern, but Eva couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. She didn't want to look at him. Not now. Not when she felt so lost. "Eva, listen to me." Peter's voice was soft but insistent, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. "We can't stay in the village any longer. The forest, it will come for us all if we let it. We need to get away. We need to leave this place behind before it's too late." "Leave?" Eva's voice cracked, barely a whisper. "Leave? How can I leave when he's still out there?" Peter stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His expression was harsh, his brows furrowed. "Eva, Max isn't out there anymore. Whatever that thing was, whatever it took from us, it's not him. The Max you knew is gone, and you need to understand that. The forest doesn't give back. It doesn't let go." Eva's heart shattered all over again at his words. "I don't care." She choked, her voice thick with the weight of her grief. "I don't care if he's gone. I can't just leave him there. I can't just walk away." Peter's eyes softened for a moment, and he stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I know, Eva. I know. But the more we stay here, the more it'll take. It's not just Max, it wants all of us. If we don't leave now, it'll drag us in too, and then there'll be nothing left of us to save." Eva closed her eyes, squeezing them shut as the tears began to spill over. She had always believed that the worst thing in the world was losing someone you loved, but she had been wrong. The worst thing was knowing they were gone, but being too powerless to do anything about it. Peter's grip tightened on her shoulder, pulling her out of her sorrowful reverie. "We're not alone here, Eva," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. "And the longer we stay, the more it will feed. The forest, whatever it is, it watches us. Every moment we're here, it's getting closer." Eva's blood ran cold. She could feel it, the eyes of the forest on her pressing in from every direction. And then, as if to confirm Peter's words, the wind shifted. It wasn't a gentle breeze this time. It was harsh, like something was moving through it. Something that didn't belong. Eva froze, her heart skipping a beat. She turned her head slowly, as though in slow motion. And then through the trees, she saw it. a shape darting from shadow to shadow just at the edge of her vision. It was fast, too fast. A blur of movement. "Peter," she whispered, her voice a tremor. "Do you see that?" Peter's face went pale, his eyes narrowing. He grabbed her arm and pulled her back, urgency flooding his movements. "We need to keep moving. Now." But it was already too late. From the shadows, the figure lunged. Ava barely had time to scream before she was dragged backward, pulled off her feet by an unseen force. Her body slammed into the ground, and her vision spun as the whispers came crashing down upon her like a physical wave. There was no time to think, no time to process. Only instinct. And in that moment, the only thing that mattered was getting away. But no matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't break free. The forest had its grip on her, pulling her deeper into its dark heart. Ava Peter's voice rang out distant, like he was trapped behind a thick wall. She reached for him, her hands outstretched, but the shadows twisted, tangled, closing in around her. The whispers grew louder, and with them came the horrible, bone-chilling realization it wasn't just the forest. The forest was a gateway, a threshold, and now it was closing in on her. Her fingers brushed against something cold, something that wasn't Peter's hand. She gasped, pulling back, her heart racing as the figure emerged from the darkness. It was no longer just a shadow. It was them, the lost children. Max among them. Their faces twisted, their eyes hollow and empty, their forms barely human. They were the forest now, part of its hunger, part of its never-ending need. "Help us," their voices whispered. "Help us, Eva." And as Eva screamed, she realized with horror that it was too late. The forest had claimed them all, and there was nothing left to save. Eva's scream was swallowed by the thick, suffocating air of the forest. The faces of the lost children twisted, and pale loomed over her, their hollow eyes gleaming with a cold, unfeeling light. Max was among them. His face was the same, yet not. The eyes that once held warmth were now voids, empty and lost to the insatiable hunger of the forest. She tried to move, but the shadows that surrounded her were too strong, too tight. They seemed to pulse with life, wrapping around her like invisible chains, pulling her deeper into their cold embrace. The whispers, the voices of the children grew louder, blending into one maddening cacophony of grief, fear, and longing. Max Eva gasped, her voice cracking. She reached out her hand, trembling, as it hovered just inches from her brother's face, but he didn't reach back. His eyes were unblinking, staring straight through her, as if she wasn't there. The Max she had known was gone, replaced by something far darker, something that didn't care, something that was no longer human. "Help us, Eva." The children's voices echoed in unison, their words sliding into her mind like poison. "Help us, or we'll never be free." Ava's breath caught in her throat, and the air around her seemed to thicken. The shadows around her began to writhe, pulling at her limbs, twisting her body, dragging her into the depths of the forest. She struggled, kicking, thrashing, but it was like fighting against the very earth itself. "No," she cried, her voice hoarse. "I won't leave you like this. I won't." But the children didn't answer. They only stared, their eyes wide, unblinking. And as they did, the forest seemed to close in around her, its limbs stretching its presence, suffocating, drowning out all light. Eva's thoughts were clouded with panic. How could she save them? How could she save Max when the forest itself was swallowing them whole? The ground beneath her feet began to shift, the dirt crumbling away, as if it were being consumed by the very roots of the trees. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they felt like they were inside her skull, scraping at her thoughts. "You can't leave," they whispered. "You're already a part of us." Ava's heart slammed against her ribs, her chest tightening as she tried to pull away, but the grip of the shadows only tightened. She had heard Peter's warnings, but she had never truly believed him, not until now. The forest wasn't just a place. It was alive, it was watching, and it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to step too far, to fall too deep into its trap. The figure of Max took a step toward her, his form shifting in the shadows. He was no longer just a child. He had become something more, something other. His face was pale, his skin stretched thin over his bones, and his lips curled into a twisted, mocking smile. "You can't save us." Max's voice echoed, but it wasn't his voice anymore. It was the voice of the forest, of everything that had been taken, everything that had been consumed. "We are already gone." Ava's hands trembled as she reached out, her heart breaking. "Max, please," she begged, her voice trembling with raw emotion. "Please come back. I'll find a way to save you. I'll find a way to stop this." But Max didn't answer. He only stared at her, his hollow eyes reflecting the emptiness of the forest. And with that, the shadows tightened around her, pulling her closer to the darkness. The whispers grew louder until they were deafening, until it felt like they were suffocating her, consuming her very soul. Ava's heart pounded in her chest as she fought against the shadows, her body heavy, as if the very weight of the forest was dragging her under. And then, in the midst of it all, she felt something. A shift, a change in the air, a presence different from the children, from Max. It was something else, something ancient, something that wasn't bound by the same rules. The forest was changing. It was no longer just the trees and the shadows. It was something older, something darker. Ava's body jerked as if pulled by an invisible force. She felt herself being lifted, her feet leaving the ground, and the whispers became a violent roar in her ears. The trees groaned their trunks, bending their branches, snapping like brittle bones. The forest was alive in a way that no human could understand. And then in an instant it stopped. The shadows, the whispers, they were gone. Ava found herself standing in the center of the clearing alone. She blinked, her head spinning as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. The forest was silent now, too silent, as if the world itself had held its breath. The only sound was her own ragged breathing, the echo of her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She looked around, her heart racing. There were no children, no Max, no shadows. It was just the trees, empty, cold. The wind had died and the forest stood still. "Max!" she whispered, her voice trembling as she took a step forward. But there was no answer. There was nothing. Ava turned in a circle, her eyes scanning the trees, the ground beneath her feet. But it was like everything had vanished. The forest had taken what it wanted, and now there was nothing left. A feeling of dread washed over her like a cold hand brushing against her spine. She wasn't alone. She could feel it. She could sense it. And then she heard it. A whisper. A voice. "Eva." Her breath caught in her throat. It was faint, almost too soft to hear, but it was unmistakable. A voice, Max's voice. It was coming from deep within the trees. She froze, and for the first time Eva understood. Max wasn't gone. Not yet. He was waiting for her to follow. The forest wasn't finished with her. Not yet. And as Ava took her first step toward the voice, she knew that there would be no turning back. The forest had claimed them all, and it would never let go. Ava couldn't tear her eyes away from the shadowy figures between the ancient trees. The sensation that something invisible was watching her from behind each leaf and branch, like an unending nightmare, grew stronger with each passing second. She tried to convince herself it was just the panic seizing her mind, but the feeling of being surrounded by something unearthly only grew more intense. "Max," she whispered, not really expecting an answer, but still yearning to hear his voice one more time. Just knowing he was somewhere out there, even if he had become a part of the darkness surrounding her, would somehow make her feel less alone. Suddenly, a gust of icy wind whipped through the forest as though it wanted to wipe away all that remained in the air. The trees shuddered, their branches creaking, and the ghostly images of the lost children danced in the shadows, their whispers rising again, louder, more distinct, like fragments of a shattered nightmare. "Max!" Eva cried out again, this time with more force, a desperate call that echoed through the trees. Something inside her had shifted, a strange urge, propelling her forward away from despair. She began to step deeper into the darkness, her heart pounding as her legs shook beneath her. Every step felt like it was dragging her into an abyss. Then she felt it, a cold, clammy hand, like the touch of a specter, settle onto her shoulder from behind. "Be careful, Eva." Peter's voice came from behind, laced with concern. "Don't keep going. We need to get out of here." Eva didn't turn around. She couldn't. Despite the ache in her chest, despite the overwhelming sorrow that had gripped her, there was something stronger than fear. Now a powerful drive to reach Max. She had to save him. She had to bring him back from whatever dark place he had been taken. Peter saw her moving forward without hesitation, unable to stop her, and followed. It was too late to turn back. They had ventured too deep into the woods. The trees around them grew denser. The air became heavier, suffocating, as if the very forest itself was swallowing them whole. They could no longer see the light filtering through the canopy. The leaves around them seemed to shift unnaturally, as though they were alive, blinking and swaying with a strange energy, a life force that was not their own. Then, without warning, Max appeared, not as a full figure, but a silhouette, hazy and indistinct, emerging from the shadowy edges ahead. His hair was no longer dark. Now it shimmered with an eerie silver glow, like fog hanging beneath the moonlight. Max turned to face them, but his eyes, those eyes that had once been filled with warmth, were now hollow voids staring into nothingness. "Max!" she whispered, her heart both shattering and fluttering at the same time. But he didn't answer. He only stared, his gaze distant, unfeeling, as if he was no longer there, not really. The Max she knew had been swallowed up by something far darker. "Help us, Eva." The voices of the children echoed, all of them speaking in unison, now their voices mixing into a haunting, melodious chant. "Help us, or we'll never be free." Eva's breath caught in her throat, the air thick with the presence of the lost, the tormented souls that filled the forest. And then, just as her mind was beginning to grasp the impossibility of the situation, Max spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but sharp and chilling. "We can't go back," Max said. But it wasn't his voice. It was the voice of the forest, of the thing that had taken him. "We can't escape." Eva stood frozen, her eyes locked on Max, unable to move. She could feel the shifting presence of the forest, as if it was stretching its limbs around them, pushing them deeper into its abyss. She had heard Peter's warnings, but she had never truly believed them until now. The forest wasn't just a place. It was alive, it was watching, and it had been waiting for this moment. Peter stepped forward, his grip on her hand tightening. "Eva," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We have to go now. It's too dangerous. It will consume us if we don't leave." But Eva couldn't. Not now. She couldn't leave Max here in whatever twisted form he had become. She couldn't just walk away. Eva's heart pounded in her chest, a heavy rhythm of fear and hope clashing with each beat. She couldn't tear her eyes away from Max, or the thing that had once been him. The longer she stared into his hollow eyes, the more she felt like she was sinking slowly, inevitably, into the forest's embrace. He wasn't just lost anymore. He was changed, and deep down she knew it. Whatever had taken him had woven him into the very fabric of this place, into its twisted hunger. "Max!" Eva whispered again, the word barely audible against the rustling of the trees. The voices of the lost children filled her ears, a symphony of agony of 1,000 souls still reaching out. Please come back. Please. But Max, or whatever this thing was that wore his face, simply stood there unmoving. It wasn't just the physical distance between them that kept them apart. It was as though a great invisible force had tethered him to the darkness, a force that would not let him return to her no matter how badly she wanted it. She reached forward, trembling, but Peter's hand shot out, pulling her back, his grip firm but full of desperation. Ava, stop. Peter's voice was hoarse. You have to stop. He's gone. This is not him. You have to let him go. Please, for your own safety, we have to leave. Ava jerked her arm from his grasp, a burst of defiance lighting within her. No, no, I won't leave him. I won't leave him to this thing. Her voice cracked, but her resolve hardened. He's still here. I can feel it. Peter's expression twisted in anguish. He stepped closer to her, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and pity. Eva, please. You have no idea what you're dealing with, what this place does to people. She turned to face him, her breath quick and shallow eyes wide with a blend of desperation and anger. Then help me save him. You said it yourself, we can leave. But not him. Not if we leave him like this. Peter's gaze faltered, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had been thrust upon them both. I wish it were that simple, he muttered. But the forest, it doesn't give back. Once it has a soul, it doesn't let go. And it doesn't just take, it corrupts. The wind shifted, and suddenly the voice that had haunted Eva all along Max's voice spoke again. This time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a command, dark and deep, like the very roots of the earth had spoken. Come closer. Eva froze, her entire body locking in place as the voice enveloped her, crawling into her ears and down into her chest. Her feet moved before she could think, compelled by the magnetic pull of the voice. She stepped forward, barely noticing that Peter was pulling at her arm, shouting her name. Eva, no, don't. But it was too late. She was already too far gone. The shadows seemed to stir around her, and for a moment, the trees themselves seemed to bow, groaning under the weight of an unseen presence. The air thickened, a rancid chill settling in her bones. It wasn't just the cold. It was the forest, the hunger, the thing that had wrapped its tendrils around her mind, her soul. Max's form shifted, melting, twisting like a half-formed nightmare in the darkness. His body contorted as if he were being pulled apart and put back together, bones snapping and reshaping in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The sound of his body shifting was a grotesque symphony, like wet branches snapping underfoot. Eva gasped, stumbling backward. Max, she cried again, but now the words felt hollow, meaningless. This thing wasn't her brother anymore. It was something else entirely. Something that wanted to take her too. The creature that was once Max took a step forward, its mouth opening in a wide grin that stretched unnaturally across its face. Help us, Eva. The voice echoed again, but now it was layered, joined by the voices of the other children, the lost souls of the forest. Eva's pulse quickened. A cold sweat covered her skin. It's not Max. It's not him anymore. She staggered backward away from the horrific creature. It stepped closer again, and just as she turned to run, a clawed hand shot out, seizing her wrist in a grip so tight it sent a shock of pain up her arm. You can't leave Eva, the creature hissed through gritted teeth. The voice was no longer Max's. It was something darker, something much older, and far more malevolent. Once you're here, you belong to us. Eva yanked her arm, trying to break free, but the hand only tightened its claws, digging into her flesh. She cried out, but the sound was swallowed by the unearthly shrieks of the other lost children. Their faces flickered and warped in the shadows, their eyes wide and staring full of both suffering and malice. "Peter!" She screamed, her voice hoarse and desperate. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, only feel the terrible weight of the forest closing in on her. Peter was by her side in an instant, his hand gripping hers as he pulled her away, his body straining against the force of the thing that held her. With a final violent tug, he yanked her free, and they stumbled backward, their feet tripping over the uneven ground. But the creature didn't stop. It surged forward, its limbs stretching, growing unnaturally long, its fingers cracking and snapping like brittle wood. "We will never let you go." It roared, its voice now filled with rage as it lunged toward them. But just as it reached them, something strange happened. A blinding light erupted from the trees, filling the clearing with a warmth that pushed back the shadows. The creature screeched, its body writhing as if the light was burning it from the inside out. The forest groaned as though the earth itself was resisting. The light flickered, crackling like fire, and for a split second, Eva thought she saw something. Someone standing in the center of the clearing, a figure silhouetted by the glowing light. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the light vanished, leaving nothing but a strange, oppressive silence behind. Eva and Peter stood there, breathless, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. They had escaped for now. But they both knew deep down that they had not finished with the forest. It had not finished with them. Max was still out there trapped, and Eva knew that one way or another the forest would come for them again. Eva's chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a physical force. She stood in the clearing, her heart still racing, the echoes of the creature's rage reverberating in her ears. The air felt thick, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for them. Peter's hand remained firmly on her shoulder, his grip a quiet anchor in the midst of the terror. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief, and yet he didn't speak. He didn't need to. They both understood. The forest had let them go for now, but it would never truly release them. It had tasted them, felt their fear, and it was not finished. The wind had died down completely. The clearing, once alive with whispers and unseen movement, now felt hollow, silent. Eva glanced over at Peter, her voice trembling. "What was that light? Who was that?" Peter turned his head slowly, his eyes narrowing as if trying to see something that wasn't there. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like it. But it saved us. For now." He took a breath, his voice growing more somber. "The forest has its own way of showing mercy, but it's not kind. The light was the forest's way of letting us know we're not done. It'll come for us again." Eva's mind raced, her thoughts spinning. What had she just seen? The figure in the light, the power that had pushed back the creature. She wanted to believe it was a sign, a signal that there was a way out of this nightmare. But the terror still clung to her, gnawing at her insides. The forest had not truly been defeated. It had only momentarily relented, like a predator pulling back before the kill. And then from the corner of her vision, she saw it again, a flicker, a movement, a shape darting between the trees. Her pulse quickened, the panic rising once more. "Max," she whispered, though she knew it wasn't him. It couldn't be. But the temptation to call out again, to believe that somehow, somewhere the brother she had lost was still waiting for her, was too strong. "Don't," Peter warned, his voice urgent. "It's not him. It's the forest. It's playing with you. You saw what it did to him." "He's gone, Eva." Eva turned to face him, her chest tightening with the familiar ache of loss. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "He's still out there. I know he is. He has to be." Peter looked at her with a mix of sadness and frustration, his eyes dark with the knowledge he had been carrying for years. "I've seen it before," he said quietly. "The forest doesn't just take, it keeps. And when it has you, it doesn't let go. Not until there's nothing left." Ava stepped back, her hands trembling. The weight of his words sank in deeper than she wanted to admit. The forest had been waiting for her, for all of them, and it had taken them. Taken her brother, taken so many others before him, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't give in to the hopelessness, not when there was a chance, just a slim chance that Max could still be saved. She wouldn't. "Peter," she said softly, the resolve returning to her voice. "I have to go back. I have to find him. I can't leave him there. I can't leave him in this." Peter sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of his own fears. "Ava, if you go back, there won't be any turning around. The forest will take you next, and then nothing will be left of you." Ava looked away, her gaze once again drawn to the flickering shape among the trees. There was no choice. She couldn't turn her back on Max, not now. The forest might have him, but she would find him. She had to. "I don't care what it takes," she said, her voice firm now, despite the fear that still coiled in her gut. "I'm not leaving without him." Peter stepped forward, his hand outstretched, but he didn't stop her. "Then I'm coming with you," he said quietly. "But you have to know this. There's no coming back from this. Whatever happens, we face it together." Ava nodded. The air around them grew heavier, the pressure of the forest's gaze almost unbearable. She could feel the weight of it, its hunger, its watchfulness. But she wouldn't stop. She couldn't stop. Together they began walking toward the trees again, the path ahead, dark and uncertain. The whispering rose once more, soft at first, but growing louder as they drew closer. And then the laughter of the lost children. "Max," Eva called again, this time with more conviction. "Max, if you can hear me, please, I'm coming for you." But the trees answered with silence. A thick, oppressive silence that felt like the world holding its breath. As they entered deeper into the heart of the forest, the ground beneath them seemed to shift. The path, once clear, became twisted serpentine, like the forest itself was changing, adapting to their presence. The whispers had turned into a chorus, now a growing crescendo of voices, but each word seemed to echo through their minds instead of their ears. "Ava." The voice of a child whispered, soft and haunting. "Help us." She flinched, the voice too close, too real, too desperate. "Max," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please." Suddenly, the trees around them parted, and there, standing in the center of the clearing, was Max. His figure was clearer now, no longer a shadow, but still not truly him. He stood motionless, his eyes empty, staring straight ahead. "Max." Eva took a tentative step forward, her hands trembling as she reached out to him. "It's me, Eva. I've come to bring you home." But the figure that had once been her brother did not move. It simply stood, its hollow eyes watching her. And then in a voice that wasn't his, the creature spoke. "You should never have come back." Eva froze, her heart sinking. The forest wasn't just keeping him. It had changed him. The forest was never going to let go. And now neither would she. Ava's heart thundered in her chest as she stood there, frozen, staring at the creature that once resembled her brother. The figure, still and silent, stood like a dark mirror of Max, its eyes empty and void of the warmth she once knew. She took a step forward, her legs shaking beneath her. Every instinct told her to run, but the pull toward him, the need to bring him back, was stronger than anything else. "Max?" Her voice cracked as she called out again, though this time it felt more like a plea than a command. "Please. I'm here. I won't leave you. Please come back." The thing, whatever it was, didn't respond. It remained motionless, its hollow gaze fixed on her, its lips twisting into a mockery of a smile. The forest around them seemed to pulse as if the trees themselves were breathing, and the air thickened, laden with a cold, suffocating presence. Peter stood behind her, his eyes darting nervously around the clearing, clearly unwilling to go any further. He spoke softly, his voice tinged with fear. "Eva, this isn't Max anymore. This is the forest. It's what's controlling him now." Eva didn't look back at him. She couldn't. The pain of hearing those words, the forest, was enough to almost break her. But she couldn't give up. She had come too far. The whispers began to rise again, the voices of the lost children swirling around her, filling her ears with a cacophony of pleas, their sounds blending into a single agonizing chorus. They were calling to her, urging her to follow, to join them in their endless torment. It was all she could do to block them out, to focus on the one figure in the clearing that still mattered, Max. "I will save you," Eva whispered her words more to herself than to the creature before her. "I will bring you back." As if hearing her words, the creature's smile widened. Its mouth stretched too far, impossibly wide, until it cracked open, revealing a darkness deeper than anything she had ever known. The ground beneath Eva's feet seemed to tremble as the creature spoke again, its voice an unnatural, hollow echo. "You cannot save him, Eva. He is gone. He belongs to the forest now." The wind picked up again, swirling in a violent gust that sent the trees creaking and groaning. The whispers grew louder, their voices blending with the rustling of the leaves. The ground beneath Eva's feet began to shift, as though the forest itself was moving, pulling her into its depths. Peter stepped forward, his face a mask of fear and determination. "Eva, we need to leave. Now. It's over. We can't save him. Not like this, please." But Eva shook her head, the tears streaming down her face. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to believe it. The voice inside her was telling her something else, something stronger than all the fear, all the doubt. Max was still here, somewhere. Suddenly, the creature in front of her let out a low, guttural laugh that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. It wasn't the voice of her brother anymore. It was something far darker, something that reveled in the pain it had caused. And then, as if the forest were taunting her, the figure shifted, its body contorted in grotesque ways, its limbs snapping and cracking as if they were being pulled apart. The skin on its face stretched, and the eyes that had once been Max's became hollow black pits that seemed to gaze into her very soul. "You cannot leave this place," the creature growled. "You have already given yourself to the forest, and once you belong here, there is no escaping it." Eva's breath caught in her throat. She stepped back, horrified, as the creature reached out for her. Its clawed fingers stretched toward her, its grin widening as it closed in. The air around them seemed to darken, the shadows growing deeper, closer, suffocating her. But then, in a sudden burst of clarity, Eva remembered something. A fleeting memory. A story her grandmother had told her when she was just a child sitting on the porch of their house. "The forest doesn't just take," her grandmother had whispered. "It feeds on the lost. But it has a weakness. It can only hold you if you let it. If you remember who you are, it cannot hold you forever." Eva's eyes widened. She knew what she had to do. With a burst of adrenaline, she spun on her heel, facing Peter. "Run!" she shouted. "Now I'll hold it off." Peter opened his mouth to protest, but she was already moving her body, propelled by instinct. She didn't have much time. She had to fight for Max, even if it meant sacrificing herself to the forest. The light that had briefly shown itself before the force that had saved them was their only hope. The forest might have taken Max, but it hadn't taken her will. Not yet. With every ounce of strength, Eva stepped forward, facing the creature head on. She could feel the air around her crackling with energy, the shadows pressing in on her from every side. The creature growled, its eyes locked on hers, the smile still stretching unnaturally wide. "I won't let you win," she whispered to the creature, her voice shaking but steady. "I will never give in." She closed her eyes and reached deep within herself, focusing on the memory of her brother, on the love they had shared, on the bond that had once connected them. It was the only thing she had left to fight with, and then, as if summoned by her will, a burst of light exploded from the ground beneath her feet. The light was blinding, a searing, pure white that cut through the darkness, driving the creature back. The forest screamed, its branches cracking and snapping as the light expanded, pushing back the shadows that had surrounded them. For a brief moment, Eva thought she saw something, someone moving at the edge of the light. A figure, faint and blurry, standing just beyond the reach of the forest's grasp. Max. But just as quickly as the vision had appeared, it vanished, leaving only the blinding light. Eva's legs gave out, her body collapsing to the ground. The forest around her was still, the air thick with the silence of something waiting, and then in the distance a voice. "Eva!" It was Max. It was really him this time, and though she knew it wasn't over yet, though she knew the battle for her brother and for herself was far from done, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe there was still hope. Eva's eyes fluttered open, her body aching as if it had been torn apart and put back together. The blinding light had faded, leaving only the oppressive silence of the forest around her. She lay on the ground, the cold dirt beneath her cold skin, her heart racing as she struggled to catch her breath. But the silence was not comforting. It was eerie, like the calm before the storm. She pushed herself up, her hands shaking as they touched the ground, trying to steady herself. The forest was still around her, the twisted trees standing silent like sentinels. Yet something had changed. She could feel it in the air. The heaviness, the suffocating weight of the place had lifted, even if just slightly. "Max," she whispered, her voice hoarse. She didn't know if he could hear her, if he was even still in there somewhere in the depths of the forest. But she had to try. A soft rustle reached her ears. Her heart leapt. She turned toward the sound, but it wasn't Max. It was Peter, stumbling toward her through the underbrush, his face ashen, his eyes wide with worry. "You're alive," he breathed, kneeling down beside her. His hands hovered near her, uncertain, before he gently helped her sit up. "I thought I lost you. I thought." "I'm fine," Eva said, cutting him off. She wasn't fine. She wasn't sure she would ever be fine again. But she wasn't about to admit that. Not to him. Not to herself. "Where's Max?" Her voice cracked as she said his name, her throat tight with emotion. Peter shook his head, his expression hardening. "He's still out there, Eva. You saw it. You saw him. He's not Max anymore. The forest has him, and the forest doesn't give back." Eva swallowed, shaking her head vehemently. "No. No, you don't understand. That was not him. That was the forest. The forest is using him. But he's still in there, Peter." "I know he is." Peter didn't respond immediately. He just stared at her, his eyes filled with both sadness and frustration. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to hold on to hope as badly as she did. But the look in his eyes told her he no longer believed in the possibility of saving Max. He had given up on him, but Eva couldn't. She couldn't give up. She wouldn't. Not now. "Look," Peter said, his voice low and strained. "The forest isn't going to just let us walk out of here. It's not done with us yet. If we don't leave, we won't make it out alive, Eva. We need to get out of here now." Eva's gaze hardened, her jaw clenched. "I'm not leaving without Max," she said, her voice resolute. "I've come this far. I'll die before I leave him in this hellhole." Peter's eyes flickered with pain, but he said nothing. He just stood up, reaching out a hand to help her up his face, tired his will bending against the force of the forest that had broken them both. Then let's go. Let's at least get closer to the edge of the woods. It's better than staying here. Ava shook her head, refusing to give in. No. We go back. I have to find him. Peter seemed to sense the finality in her words, the unshakable determination in her voice. He sighed deeply, the weight of the decision settling heavily on him. Fine. But you can't do this alone. Together, they began walking deeper into the forest again, their footsteps tentative but determined. The trees seemed to lean closer, the branches stretching out as if to block their path, but Ava pushed forward. She could feel it now, the presence of something in the distance, something familiar yet distant. The air felt charged with energy, a crackling tension that felt like the pulse of the forest itself. The whispers returned softer now, almost like a lullaby weaving their way through the rustling leaves crawling into Eva's ears. Help us, they whispered. We're waiting. Help us. The voices were maddening, clawing at her mind. She pressed her hands to her ears, trying to block them out, but they were too persistent. She could still hear them faintly, like 100 souls calling out from beyond. We're so close, Eva murmured, her breath quickening. I can feel it. He's close. I'm close. Peter shot her a look, his face drawn and exhausted. Eva, but before he could finish, the trees ahead of them began to shift. The ground beneath their feet quivered, and a strange low hum filled the air. The forest had heard them. It was reacting, pulling them in. Without warning, a shadow darted through the trees. Eva's heart stopped. She turned quickly, and there at the edge of the clearing was Max, or the thing that had been Max. His form flickered half real, half ghost, like a wraith caught between worlds. Max, Eva cried out, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. She ran toward him without thinking, Peter shouting behind her, but she couldn't stop. Max turned his head, his eyes, those empty, hollow eyes, fixated on her as he stepped forward. You shouldn't have come back. He rasped, his voice hoarse and unnatural. You belong here now. Eva stopped dead in her tracks, terror gripping her heart as she looked at the thing standing before her. It wore Max's face, but the smile, it wasn't his smile. It was twisted, cruel, devoid of the love she once knew. Max, she whispered, shaking her head. This isn't you. You have to fight it. Please fight it. I won't leave you here. But Max didn't respond. Instead, the creature laughed, a high-pitched, hollow laugh that sent a shiver down her spine. It was a laugh filled with pain, but also something darker, something older. You're already here, Ava. You're already one of us. Max's voice was no longer his own, and yet it was the forest speaking through him. Ava's chest tightened, the weight of what she was facing, pressing down on her like a physical force. The thing before her wasn't Max anymore. It was the forest. The forest had taken him, and now it was trying to take her too. Peter grabbed her arm, pulling her back, his voice frantic. Ava, we can't help him. We have to go. But Eva didn't move. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked on Max, on the thing that had been him. And then, as though the forest was acknowledging her defiance, the ground trembled again, and something far worse emerged. Ava's heart raced as the ground beneath her seemed to tremble with a deeper force, like the forest itself was coming alive, responding to her presence. She could feel the air shift, the temperature drop, and the very earth groan beneath her feet. The thing that had once been Max continued to stand before her, its hollow eyes fixed on her, its lips stretched into an unnatural smile that didn't reach the eyes. The figure twitched in place, its body subtly jerking, like something trying to maintain the last shred of humanity. You're not him, Eva whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're not Max. Max would never." She couldn't finish the sentence. The words felt hollow in her mouth. The truth was undeniable. This thing before her was no longer her brother. It had become something else. Something that was part of the forest now. The thing that had once been Max tilted its head, its grotesque smile widening further as it moved closer to her, its voice low and rasping. "Max is gone. I am what remains. You will be too. You'll belong to the forest soon enough." Peter, still gripping her arm, tugged her back urgently. "Ava, we have to move now. The forest is pulling us in. We're not safe here." But Eva couldn't bring herself to look away from Max or what was left of him. She felt her body trembling, a mixture of terror and sadness overwhelming her. This wasn't him anymore, and yet in some sick, twisted way, the forest had made him part of itself. He was lost, and now it was coming for her too. The creature took another step forward, and with it the ground shook again, but this time more violently. The trees around them began to bend unnaturally, their branches creaking and groaning as though they were being pulled toward the center of the clearing. The air felt thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides. The whispers of the lost children grew louder, a cacophony of agony and hunger. Peter's grip tightened on her arm, pulling her back again. "Eva, this isn't real. It's the forest. It's playing with your mind. We need to leave before it takes us both." Ava's thoughts raced as she tried to process everything. The creature, the whispers, the dark presence of the forest pressing in on her. Was Peter right? Was she just imagining all of this? No. She could feel the pull, the weight of the forest's grip on her. She could feel its hunger, its desire to claim her, just as it had claimed Max. "Max," she cried, her voice cracking. "Please, if you can hear me, fight it. Come back to me." For a moment, the creature that had once been Max stopped, its head tilting slightly, as though it were listening. But then, with a sickening snap, it shook its head and let out a laugh, a sound that was so wrong, so twisted, it chilled Eva's bones. "Max is gone," it hissed. "You are mine now." With those words, the creature lunged its arms, extending impossibly long, reaching out to seize her. The shadows around them deepened, and for the first time, Eva felt the true weight of the forest's presence. It wasn't just a place, it was a force that would not let them go no matter how hard they fought. Eva Peter shouted, pulling her backward, but the force of the creature's movement sent a shockwave through the air, knocking them both off their feet. They tumbled backward, landing on the cold, hard ground, but the creature was relentless. It was coming for them. The whispers rose to a deafening volume, filling her mind with 1,000 voices, all of them pleading, screaming, calling her name. "Help us," they cried, their voices merging into a single, agonizing wail. But Eva didn't hear them. She didn't listen. Her eyes were locked on the creature that had once been her brother, and all she could think of was how to save him. In the chaos, something inside Eva shifted. She wasn't going to let the forest take her. Not like this. Not after everything she had been through. The bond between her and Max was still there. She could feel it even through the veil of darkness that the forest had cast over him. She was still his sister, and no matter what the forest had done, she wouldn't let go. "Max!" she screamed again, her voice cutting through the noise of the forest. "I won't leave you. I will save you." And then she did something she didn't expect, something that had been hidden in her all along. She reached out toward the creature that had once been Max, and her hand began to glow a faint, flickering light like a beacon. The creature recoiled, as if the light were painful, like it couldn't bear to touch it. Ava's heart raced as the light grew brighter, brighter than before, shining like a flare in the darkness. The creature snarled, its eyes narrowing, but it couldn't seem to approach. The forest, too, seemed to flinch, its trees creaking, as though the very essence of it was being repelled. Peter, still stunned, looked at her with disbelief. "Eva, what are you doing? You can't fight this." But Eva didn't hear him. She didn't need to. The light she had called up was more than just a force. It was her will, her connection to Max, her refusal to let the forest claim him completely. She stepped forward closer to the creature that had once been Max. The light flared even brighter, and for a split second the creature screamed, its twisted form writhing as though it was being torn apart. But before Eva could react, the ground beneath her feet cracked. The earth split open, and she was falling into the darkness. The light flickered one last time as she plunged deeper into the void, her screams swallowed by the endless shadows of the forest. Eva's world collapsed into darkness. The light that had burned so brightly vanished, leaving nothing but the oppressive weight of the forest closing in on her. She fell endlessly, as if the ground itself had swallowed her whole. Her body was weightless, suspended in an abyss, and for a brief moment she thought she might be dreaming. But the sharp pangs of fear in her chest told her otherwise. Her senses swam. The air was thick, heavy with something ancient, something that wasn't quite real. She gasped for breath, but her lungs felt tight, like she was drowning in the very essence of the forest. The whispers started again, soft at first, then growing louder, more insistent. They were all around her now, the voices of the lost children, twisted, desperate. "Help us. Join us. Help us." She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the sounds, but they only grew louder, more deafening. Every breath she took felt like it was being stolen from her, and then she landed. Her body slammed against the cold earth, and she cried out in pain, her limbs aching from the fall. She lay there for a moment, disoriented, the sounds of the forest swirling around her. The air was heavy, thick, with a damp, musty scent, like the earth itself was decaying. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her head spinning. She was no longer in the clearing where Max had stood. The trees were different here, darker, twisted into unnatural shapes, their branches reaching down like claws. The ground was slick with dark, sticky mud, and the atmosphere was oppressive, like the very air was alive, pressing down on her, suffocating her. Eva's heart pounded in her chest as she stood, her eyes scanning her surroundings. She was deep within the forest now, farther than she had ever gone. This was a place of pure darkness, where the forest's true power was at its peak. In the distance she saw something move, something familiar. Her pulse quickened as she recognized it. A shadow, a figure, Max. Her voice was hoarse, filled with both hope and dread. The figure turned toward her, its face still shrouded in darkness. It was him, or at least it looked like him. His form was hunched, unnatural, his movements jerky and distorted, like a puppet controlled by invisible strings. "Max!" Eva took a step forward, her breath catching in her throat, but the figure did not respond. It merely stood there, its head tilted to one side, its hollow eyes fixed on her. The whispers grew louder again, wrapping themselves around her, suffocating her, drowning her in their constant, maddening cries. The figure's lips twitched, as if it was about to speak. And then, in a voice that was barely audible, but unmistakable, the creature spoke. "You shouldn't have come." Eva froze. His voice was wrong. It was distorted, hollow, like it was coming from somewhere deep within the earth. It wasn't the Max she remembered. This thing was not him. She took a step back, the fear gripping her like a vice. No. No, Max. You're still in there. I know you are. Please. The creature took a slow, deliberate step toward her, its movements unnatural, the very air around it seeming to bend and twist. "I am here, but not the way you remember it." hissed its voice, a twisted mockery of Max's. You're already a part of this. The forest chooses. The forest has claimed you. Eva's stomach churned as the creature's words sank in. It was right. She had already fallen too deep into this place. She had already become part of it. No, she whispered, shaking her head, tears welling in her eyes. I won't let you take me. I won't let the forest take me. The figure took another step forward, and Ava's pulse quickened. It was so close now. The whispers filled her mind, pressing against her thoughts, drowning out everything else. Help us. Help us, Ava. The forest was suffocating her, pulling her under with every passing second. She could feel the presence of it, its hunger crawling through her skin, wrapping around her heart, squeezing tighter and tighter. And then from deep within the shadows, she saw something else. Another figure. A silhouette. It was barely visible, a shadow among the trees, but it was there, moving toward her. Who's there? Eva called out, her voice shaking. The figure didn't respond, but as it stepped closer, a soft light flickered in its wake, dim at first, but growing stronger as it drew nearer. The light was pure, like a beacon in the darkness. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the light. It was the same light that had repelled the creature earlier, the force that had briefly driven the forest back. The figure stepped into the light, revealing its face, and Eva gasped in shock. It was her grandmother. Her grandmother's face, worn and tired, but unmistakably there. Eva's throat constricted as she stared at her, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. Grandma Eva whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and hope. How? Her grandmother smiled softly, the light surrounding her growing brighter with each passing second. I've been waiting for you, Ava, she said, her voice warm but tinged with sorrow. The forest is not what it seems. It doesn't just take, it changes. But you can still fight it. Eva's chest tightened. But Max, I can't leave him here. I can't leave him to this. Her grandmother's smile faded and she stepped closer. The forest will not release him. It has claimed him. But you, Ava, you can still save yourself. You can still leave before it's too late. Ava shook her head, tears spilling from her eyes. I can't leave him. Not like this. Her grandmother's eyes softened, a deep sadness settling in her gaze. I understand. But sometimes the ones we love, sometimes they are too far gone. And the forest will take more if you stay. Ava's breath hitched. No, I won't leave him. Her grandmother nodded, her expression resolute. Then you must face the heart of the forest, Eva. You must face what it is and not let it claim you. The light around her grandmother intensified, and the forest seemed to retreat, the darkness ebbing back just a little. The whispers quieted. Eva's heart raced, but for the first time since entering the forest, she felt a glimmer of hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the forest's hunger was still strong. But now she had something she didn't have before, a guide. And with that, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. Eva's heart was still pounding. But as the light around her grandmother grew stronger, the oppressive weight of the forest seemed to lift, if only just for a moment. The whispers that had surrounded her were now distant, fading into the background. But the fear still clung to her like a shadow. Her grandmother stepped forward, the soft light still radiating from her, casting a gentle glow that pierced the darkness around them. Ava's chest tightened with both sorrow and hope. She had come so far, but she could still feel the pull of the forest, the suffocating desire for her to stay, to join the lost souls that it had claimed. But her grandmother's presence was a lifeline, a tether to reality, to something good in the midst of this nightmare. The light around her grandmother was more than just a physical glow. It was a symbol of resistance, of defiance against the forest's darkness. You must understand, Eva." Her grandmother's voice was calm, but there was an urgency to it. "The forest feeds on your fear, your love, your loss. It twists everything. Max, your brother, he's not the same anymore. But that doesn't mean you are." Eva knotted her throat tight. "I can't leave him, Grandma. I can't. He's still in there. I know it." Her grandmother's face softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes, a sorrow that spoke of years of understanding that Eva wasn't ready to grasp. I know you want to save him. But the forest, it's like a disease. The more you try to hold on, the more it takes from you. You have to be strong, Eva. For yourself." Eva's mind was spinning. For yourself. How could she be strong for herself when all she could think of was Max trapped, twisted into something unrecognizable by the very place she was standing in? How could she leave him to this? But the words from her grandmother kept echoing in her mind. The forest was feeding on her. It had taken Max, and it was trying to take her too. She felt the weight of the realization settle in her chest. She couldn't fight it forever. She couldn't fight it alone. "I don't know how to let go, Eva," whispered, tears welling in her eyes again. "I don't know how." Her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch firm and reassuring. "You won't be letting go of him, Eva. You will be freeing him. The forest has a way of warping our memories, of making us feel like we can save what is already lost. But you can't save him like this. You can only save yourself." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. Eva looked at her grandmother, searching for some sign, some indication that this was the right choice, but all she saw was love and sorrow in her eyes. And then suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The trees groaned in response, and the wind picked up again, howling through the branches. The forest was angry. It wasn't going to let them go so easily. The whispers surged once more, rising like a wave, louder than ever, clawing at her mind. "Eva!" Max's voice called out from the shadows, distorted and hollow. "Help us. Come back. It's too late. You can't leave. You belong here." Eva's heart clenched, the desperation in his voice cutting through her like a knife. She could almost feel him somewhere out there waiting for her. But what he was now, what he had become, was this really still her brother? Or had he become part of the forest itself, a mere echo of what once was? "Eva," her grandmother said, her voice firm but gentle. "You can't listen to him. You can't listen to the forest anymore. It will only pull you in deeper." The forest seemed to respond, as if aware of the conversation they were having. The trees began to move again, their branches reaching down like skeletal hands, pulling at the earth, creating walls of darkness around them. The light from her grandmother flickered, dimming under the growing pressure. It was as if the forest was pushing them into the center of its darkness, unwilling to let them escape. But Eva wasn't afraid anymore. She couldn't afford to be. She turned to face her grandmother, her jaw clenched, her heart heavy with the impossible weight of the choice before her. "I won't give up on Max," she said, her voice steady. "I can't. But I'll fight the forest. I'll fight for me too." Her grandmother smiled a sad but proud smile and gave her shoulder a final reassuring squeeze. "That's all you can do. Fight, Eva. Fight to hold on to who you are and what's left of the love that ties you to this world." And then, without another word, her grandmother stepped back, the light around her beginning to fade like the last flicker of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. Eva stood alone now, her grandmother's presence gone, but the light still burned within her. The forest was closing in the whispers, loud enough to drown out her thoughts. But she didn't flinch. She didn't close her eyes. She faced the heart of the forest, its monstrous presence, its twisted shadows, and she refused to let it break her. The creature Max stepped forward again, its form more solid, now more real. Its eyes were wide and hollow, the dark voids that stared into her soul. Max Eva whispered again, this time with more force, more conviction. "I'm here. I won't leave you." But the creature's twisted grin only grew wider, its voice mocking. "You're already too late." Eva's breath caught in her throat and she stepped forward. The creature lunged, but this time Eva didn't flinch. With a scream, she called on every ounce of strength she had left. The light within her flared again, brighter than before, and the creature reeled back, screeching as the light cut through the shadows. The forest roared in protest, but Eva held firm. She had to break free. She had to save what was left of herself, even if it meant leaving Max behind. The forest could take him, but it would not take her. The light exploded from her hands, a blinding flash that pushed the creature back, its form flickering, its body dissolving into the darkness. The forest screamed in agony, the ground shaking beneath her. Eva closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the forest was silent. The darkness was gone. Max was gone, but she was still standing. The silence was deafening. Eva stood at the heart of the forest, her body trembling with exhaustion, her breath ragged from the intensity of the battle. The light that had burned so brightly inside her had faded, leaving only a lingering warmth in her chest. The shadows around her were still too still. The forest had retreated, but for how long? The oppressive weight of the place still lingered in the air, thick with the promise of something more, something far darker than what she had just faced. The ground beneath her feet was cracked, the remnants of the forest's twisted power still lingering in the air. She could feel the pulse of the forest beneath the earth, like the heartbeat of something ancient, something that had lived long before her and would continue to live long after. For a moment, Eva closed her eyes and allowed herself to breathe, to let the fear ebb away. She had faced the forest's horrors. She had fought with everything she had, and she had won. But the victory felt hollow. Max was gone, and no matter how much light she had summoned, no matter how hard she had fought, she knew deep down that he was lost. A soft rustle reached her ears, and her heart skipped a beat. She froze, every muscle in her body tensing. The shadows around her shifted again, the trees creaking as if in protest. Someone was moving in the distance. Eva's pulse quickened. Was it the creature that had once been Max? Had the forest summoned it back? Her mind raced, and she took a hesitant step forward, the cold, damp earth beneath her feet, making each movement feel heavy, reluctant. "Max," she whispered, barely able to hear herself over the pounding in her chest. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. She didn't know if she was calling out of hope or desperation anymore, but she couldn't stop. She had to know. The figure that emerged from the shadows was not Max. It was a man, a stranger, yet somehow familiar. His face was gaunt, his skin pale and stretched tightly over sharp bones. His eyes were wide, haunted, and he moved with an unnatural stillness, like a puppet on strings. Eva's breath caught in her throat. She knew this man. It was Peter, but it couldn't be. Not like this. Peter's face was drawn and twisted, his lips parted in a thin, hollow smile. He stared at her without recognition, his gaze empty, as if he were lost to the same darkness that had consumed Max. His hands hung limply at his sides, his body stiff as though he were trapped in a state of suspended animation. Peter Eva's voice cracked as she spoke his name, but the word felt wrong, a hollow echo in the vast emptiness of the forest. She reached out to him, but before she could take another step, he raised a hand, a gesture that was too slow, too deliberate. The air around them seemed to freeze. "You shouldn't have come back." Eva Peter's voice rasped his words barely more than a whisper. It was his voice, but not his voice. There was something wrong with it, something deep and hollow. You've already become part of this. The forest has claimed you, just like it claimed Max. Eva stumbled back, her heart pounding as the full weight of his words sank in. The forest had taken him. It had claimed him, just like it had claimed Max. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, Peter. You're still in there. I can save you. I'll save both of you. Peter's lips curled into that sickly smile again. You can't save me, Eva. You can't save anyone. The forest doesn't let go. It has you just like it had Max. It has taken us both. Eva's eyes stung with tears. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but she felt paralyzed, caught between the desperate need to reach him and the terror of what he had become. Peter wasn't Peter anymore. The forest had changed him, twisted him, made him a part of its endless hunger. You're not him, Eva said, her voice trembling, but there was strength in her words now. You're not Peter. The forest has taken you, but I won't let it take me. I won't let it take anyone else. Peter's face contorted, his smile turning into something monstrous, something dark. You are already here, Eva. You belong here. You can't escape. You can't leave. His eyes shifted, and a flicker of something far worse than sorrow passed through them. And if you won't join me, Eva, then I'll have to make you. Before Eva could react, Peter lunged. His movement was swift, too swift, like he was no longer fully human. But Eva wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had come this far. She had fought. The forest fought for Max, and she would fight for herself now. With a cry, Eva raised her arms, and the light that had once flickered within her exploded once again, brighter than before, hotter than the sun. Peter staggered back, his hands reaching out as if to shield himself from the brilliance, but it didn't stop there. The light grew swirling around her, a fierce, white-hot glow that pushed against the shadows of the forest. The trees groaned, the ground quivered, and Peter screamed a sound of pure anguish as the light surrounded him, burning him, purging him of the forest's influence. No, Peter's voice echoed distorted as his body began to dissolve, consumed by the light. You cannot escape. And then in a burst of radiant energy, Peter was gone. The light didn't fade. It stayed swirling around her, filling the space with a warmth that didn't belong in this dark, twisted place. The forest was retreating its shadows, shrinking its whispers, silenced. Eva stood in the clearing, the light still radiating from her. The forest groaned one final time before it too seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment there was silence. True silence. The kind that only exists after a storm. She had done it. The forest was retreating, but she knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Max was still out there somewhere, and she wouldn't stop until she found him. But she had fought back. And for the first time in this endless nightmare, she felt the faintest sliver of hope. The forest was still. The oppressive weight that had clung to the air was gone, replaced by a strange, almost serene silence. The light that had burned from Eva still lingered in the air, a faint but persistent glow that illuminated the clearing. It was as if the forest in its anger and hunger had been stunned by her defiance, caught off guard by the force she had unleashed. But even in this silence, Eva knew it was only temporary. The forest had not given up. Not yet. It was merely regrouping, reasserting itself, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Max was still out there, and she still had to find him. Eva took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had fought the forest back before, but this was different. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about saving her brother, about undoing the horrors the forest had wrought. The ground beneath her feet was still trembling. though not as violently as before. The trees were still bent in unnatural ways, their twisted limbs reaching out like fingers, but for the first time, Eva felt she could stand against them. She had summoned the light. She had resisted the forest. She had faced her own deepest fears and still stood. The forest might be dark and insidious, but she wasn't done yet. With a deep breath, she set her sights on the path ahead. There was still a journey to be made. She began walking slowly at first, her steps tentative, the air around her buzzing with an eerie, otherworldly energy. The trees seemed to watch her as she moved, their eyes if they had eyes following her every step. But she didn't care. She couldn't afford to care. Not now. Not when Max needed her. The whispers returned faint at first, like a distant hum. But as she continued walking, they grew louder, clearer. The voices of the lost children, their pleas for help, their tortured cries filled the air. "Help us, Eva. Come closer. We need you." The voices pressed into her mind, trying to weaken her resolve. She could hear them calling to her from every direction, begging, pleading for her to join them, to save them from the forest's grasp. She squeezed her eyes shut, pushing them away, refusing to listen to their cries. She had made it this far by refusing to give in to the forest's manipulation. She would not falter now, and then in the distance she saw it, a shape in the shadows, moving slowly, deliberately. It was hard to make out at first, just a blur between the trees. But as it came closer, Eva's heart skipped a beat. It was Max, or the creature that had once been him. He walked with a slow, haunting gait, his body swaying unnaturally, his head tilted to one side like a puppet controlled by invisible strings. His eyes were empty, void of life, but there was something about him that still felt familiar. Something about his presence that sent a chill down Eva's spine. "Max!" she whispered, her voice trembling, her breath catching in her throat. "Max, I'm here. I won't leave you. Please." The creature stopped in its tracks, its gaze fixing on her. It tilted its head, its grin widening impossibly. But it wasn't the smile of the brother she remembered. It was a grotesque mockery of it. "You shouldn't have come back." The creature rasped its voice, hollow and distorted. "You cannot save me, Eva. The forest has already claimed me. You will join me, or you will be lost. There is no escaping." Eva's heart clenched. The forest had taken him. It had taken him completely. He wasn't even the same anymore. He was a part of the forest now, just another twisted soul trapped within its grasp. "No," Eva set her voice firm despite the panic rising in her chest. "No, I won't let it take me. You're still in there, Max. I know you are. I will save you." The creature's laughter rang out chilling and distorted. "You cannot save what's already gone." It set its voice 1,000 whispers. "You're already part of the forest. You always were." The ground beneath her feet trembled again, and this time, Eva didn't wait for the earth to crack. She moved forward one step at a time, her mind focused on the creature, on Max, on the brother she had lost. The forest might be strong, but she was stronger. The light she had called forth earlier was still burning within her. It had never left her. With every step she took, the whispers grew louder, but she drowned them out. She couldn't afford to listen to them. Not now. Not when Max needed her. She reached out her hand, trembling, and as her fingers brushed the air, the light around her flared again. It wasn't the blinding light of before, but it was enough. Enough to push back the shadows that clung to Max's form. The creature staggered back, a sound of agony escaping its mouth as the light enveloped it. But then, something even darker began to stir. The ground beneath Eva's feet cracked open, and from the rift, something huge and malevolent began to rise. The trees around them groaned, their branches snapping like brittle bones. The whispers turned into screams, their voices so loud now they felt like they were tearing at her mind. Eva's heart raced. The forest was waking up. The creature that had been Max crumbled into the shadows, its form dissolving into the darkness, leaving only the forest's true face in its wake. A massive shape, its form not entirely human, but not entirely something else either. It was the forest itself, the embodiment of everything that had been consumed by it. It towered over her, its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, piercing through her like 1,000 shards of ice. The air grew thick with its presence, and the very earth beneath her seemed to tremble in fear. Eva's knees buckled beneath her as the weight of the creature's presence pressed down on her. But she refused to fall. She couldn't. With all the strength she had left, she stepped forward, raising her hands toward the creature. She could feel the light inside her grow again, brighter this time, as she channeled everything she had left into it. The force of it burned through her, but it wasn't just light. It was her will. Her refusal to let the forest consume her completely. The creature screeched, its form flickering like it was being torn between two worlds. And then as Ava stood there holding her ground, she felt it Max. Just a whisper of his presence, just a breath of warmth deep within the darkness. He was still there, still fighting. "Max," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm here. I won't leave you." The forest screamed one final deafening scream, and then in a flash of white light it stopped. For the first time since entering the forest, Eva could hear nothing. The air was still, silent, but there was no time to rest. The battle wasn't over yet. The forest was still. The oppressive weight that had clung to the air was gone, replaced by a strange, almost serene silence. The light that had burned from Ava still lingered in the air, a faint but persistent glow that illuminated the clearing. It was as if the forest in its anger and hunger had been stunned by her defiance, caught off guard by the force she had unleashed. But even in this silence, Eva knew it was only temporary. The forest had not given up. Not yet. It was merely regrouping, reasserting itself, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Max was still out there, and she still had to find him. Eva took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had fought the forest back before, but this was different. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about saving her brother, about undoing the horrors the forest had wrought. The ground beneath her feet was still trembling, though not as violently as before. The trees were still bent in unnatural ways, their twisted limbs reaching out like fingers. But for the first time, Eva felt she could stand against them. She had summoned the light. She had resisted the forest. She had faced her own deepest fears and still stood. The forest might be dark and insidious, but she wasn't done yet. With a deep breath, she set her sights on the path ahead. There was still a journey to be made. She began walking slowly at first, her steps tentative, the air around her buzzing with an eerie, otherworldly energy. The trees seemed to watch her as she moved, their eyes if they had eyes following her every step. But she didn't care. She couldn't afford to care. Not now. Not when Max needed her. The whispers returned faint at first, like a distant hum. But as she continued walking, they grew louder, clearer. The voices of the lost children, their pleas for help, their tortured cries filled the air. "Help us, Eva. Come closer. We need you." The voices pressed into her mind, trying to weaken her resolve. She could hear them calling to her from every direction, begging, pleading for her to join them, to save them from the forest's grasp. She squeezed her eyes shut, pushing them away, refusing to listen to their cries. She had made it this far by refusing to give in to the forest's manipulation. She would not falter now. And then in the distance she saw it, a shape in the shadows moving slowly, deliberately. It was hard to make out at first, just a blur between the trees. But as it came closer, Eva's heart skipped a beat. It was Max, or the creature that had once been him. He walked with a slow, haunting gait, his body swaying unnaturally, his head tilted to one side like a puppet controlled by invisible strings. His eyes were empty, void of life, but there was something about him that still felt familiar. Something about his presence that sent a chill down Eva's spine. "Max," she whispered, her voice trembling, her breath catching in her throat. "Max, I'm here. I won't leave you. Please." The creature stopped in its tracks, its gaze fixing on her. It tilted its head, its grin widening impossibly. But it wasn't the smile of the brother she remembered. It was a grotesque mockery of it. "You shouldn't have come back." The creature rasped, its voice hollow and distorted. "You cannot save me, Eva. The forest has already claimed me. You will join me, or you will be lost. There is no escaping." Eva's heart clenched. The forest had taken him. It had taken him completely. He wasn't even the same anymore. He was a part of the forest now, just another twisted soul trapped within its grasp. "No," Eva said, her voice firm despite the panic rising in her chest. "No, I won't let it take me. You're still in there, Max. I know you are. I will save you." The creature's laughter rang out, chilling and distorted. "You cannot save what's already gone." It set its voice 1,000 whispers. "You're already part of the forest. You always were." The ground beneath her feet trembled again, and this time Eva didn't wait for the earth to crack. She moved forward one step at a time, her mind focused on the creature, on Max, on the brother she had lost. The forest might be strong, but she was stronger. The light she had called forth earlier was still burning within her. It had never left her. With every step she took, the whispers grew louder, but she drowned them out. She couldn't afford to listen to them. Not now. Not when Max needed her. She reached out her hand, trembling, and as her fingers brushed the air, the light around her flared again. It wasn't the blinding light of before, but it was enough. Enough to push back the shadows that clung to Max's form. The creature staggered back, a sound of agony escaping its mouth as the light enveloped it. But then something even darker began to stir. The ground beneath Eva's feet cracked open, and from the rift, something huge and malevolent began to rise. The trees around them groaned, their branches snapping like brittle bones. The whispers turned into screams, their voices so loud now they felt like they were tearing at her mind. Eva's heart raced. The forest was waking up. The creature that had been Max crumbled into the shadows, its form dissolving into the darkness, leaving only the forest's true face in its wake. A massive shape, its form, not entirely human, but not entirely something else either. It was the forest itself, the embodiment of everything that had been consumed by it. It towered over her, its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, piercing through her like 1,000 shards of ice. The air grew thick with its presence, and the very earth beneath her seemed to tremble in fear. Eva's knees buckled beneath her as the weight of the creature's presence pressed down on her, but she refused to fall. She couldn't. With all the strength she had left, she stepped forward, raising her hands toward the creature. She could feel the light inside her grow again, brighter this time as she channeled everything she had left into it. The force of it burned through her, but it wasn't just light. It was her will, her refusal to let the forest consume her completely. The creature screeched its form, flickering like it was being torn between two worlds. And then, as Eva stood there holding her ground, she felt it Max. Just a whisper of his presence, just a breath of warmth deep within the darkness. He was still there, still fighting. "Max," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm here. I won't leave you." The forest screamed one final deafening scream, and then in a flash of white light, it stopped. For the first time since entering the forest, Eva could hear nothing. The air was still, silent, but there was no time to rest. The battle wasn't over yet. The forest screamed in agony as the light burst from Eva, its twisted form shrinking, retreating from the force of her will. The creature, the thing that had once been Max, was no more dissolving into the light like smoke dissipating into the wind. For a brief, fleeting moment, the clearing was still the air clear of the suffocating presence that had consumed it. Eva's chest rose and fell, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her heart was steady. She had done it. She had broken through. Max was free, but even as she stood there victorious, she could feel it. The weight of the forest still hanging in the air, the oppressive darkness that had not been fully vanquished. The earth beneath her feet was still quaking, and she could hear the faintest rumble of something deep within the woods, something waiting. The whispers had quieted, but they weren't gone. They were still there in the edges of her mind, soft and insistent. Help us. Join us. Come back. Eva's pulse quickened. She knew she had only pushed the forest back, not defeated it. The forest had been a living thing, and though it had recoiled for now, it would return. It would always return. But for now there was silence, and in that silence she felt the faintest tug on her heart, a warmth, a presence still flickering in the shadows. Max's presence. She stepped forward, the light surrounding her flickering as she moved. The path ahead seemed clearer now, though the shadows still lingered, curling around the edges of the clearing, waiting to reclaim what it had lost. Eva could feel the forest's gaze on her, its hunger still present, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't alone. Eva turned around, her eyes scanning the forest, her heart still aching for Max, for the brother she had fought so desperately to save. The dark remnants of the forest swayed around her, the trees bending, stretching their limbs in a way that was unnatural. But it was different now. The air wasn't as thick, the ground not as oppressive. The light inside her flickered with renewed strength, and then she heard it, a voice. Soft like a whisper on the wind, but it wasn't the forest. It wasn't the darkness. It was familiar. Eva, her breath caught in her throat. Max. She turned swiftly, her eyes wide, her heart leaping in her chest. The voice had come from behind her, from the shadows. She stepped forward cautiously, her pulse racing. Max. She called out, her voice tentative but full of hope. Max. Is it really you? The figure that emerged from the darkness was more solid than before, more real, yet still ghostly. A shadow flickered in the space between the trees, and then, stepping into the light, she saw him. Her brother, Max, stood before her, his eyes soft and filled with something she hadn't seen before recognition. Her heart skipped a beat. He was back, her Max, but then she saw at the faintest flicker of darkness in his eyes. Just a shadow. A warning. Max smiled, but it wasn't quite the smile she remembered. It was softer, more distant, and there was something about his presence, something that felt off. Eva? He whispered, his voice gentle but hollow. I knew you would come. Tears filled her eyes. Max. She whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She stepped forward, reaching out to him. I knew you were still in there. I knew you hadn't gone. Max took a step toward her, his expression distant but warm. He extended his hand and Eva reached for it, feeling the pull of the connection she had fought so hard to regain. But just as their fingers were about to touch, a dark swirling energy pulsed through the air, and Max's form flickered again. And then she heard it, the voice, the forest. You cannot save him, Eva. You cannot save what's already mine. The words sent a cold shiver down her spine. Max's form flickered once more, the darkness creeping over him like a suffocating cloud. The connection she had felt, the warmth, was being torn away, replaced by something colder, darker. "No," Eva whispered, stepping back. "No, this isn't you, Max. You're still in there. Fight it. Please." Max's eyes flickered with something a flicker of recognition, but then the darkness returned stronger than before. His features contorted, his body jerking as the forest's influence took hold of him once more. "I am here." Eva Max's voice echoed, but it was no longer just his voice. It was the forest blending with his own. "But I belong to the forest now. I cannot return. You cannot save me." The ground beneath Eva's feet trembled again, and the forest seemed to close in on them. The shadows stretching, pressing in like walls, trapping them. "No." Eva cried out, her voice desperate, her hands reaching toward Max. "I can still help you. I won't leave you here." But the figure before her, Max, did not move, did not respond. He was gone. The forest had taken him completely, and there was nothing left but a shell of what he had been. The trees around them groaned, their branches reaching down like claws, and Eva knew the forest had won. But she wasn't done yet. With a cry, Eva raised her arms, summoning every last ounce of strength she had left. The light inside her surged, flaring up in a blinding explosion that lit up the entire clearing. The ground trembled violently beneath her, and the forest itself seemed to howl in fury. "I won't let you win," Eva shouted, her voice shaking but firm. "I will not be a part of this." The light erupted from her, a searing force that pierced the forest's darkness, pushing back the shadows, pushing back the twisted trees. She could feel it, the forest's hold on her, on Max, weakening. But it wasn't enough. The forest was fighting back, fighting to keep its grip on everything. Eva stepped forward, pushing the light through the forest. Her mind focused on Max, on freeing him from this nightmare, from the suffocating hold of the forest. She could feel his presence in the distance, a flickering light buried deep within the darkness. She wouldn't stop. She couldn't. Not now. Eva's heart thundered in her chest as the light surged from her body, flaring into the oppressive darkness that had suffocated the forest for so long. The ground beneath her feet cracked and trembled, and the trees around her groaned, their twisted branches screeching against the pressure of the light. The shadows, once thick and inescapable, began to shrink, retreating from the force of her will. But even as the darkness seemed to recoil, Eva felt it, the weight of the forest's power pushing back against her, trying to reclaim what it had lost. The whispers of the lost souls rose again, louder, this time their cries filling the air like a cacophony of agony. "Help us. Join us. We belong here, Ong." Eva squeezed her eyes shut, the cries clawing at her mind. The light she was wielding flickered, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She could feel Max in the distance, trapped, still fighting against the pull of the forest. She wouldn't let him become another lost soul. She wouldn't let him remain a part of this nightmare. "Max!" she cried, her voice echoing through the clearing, through the cracks in the earth that seemed to stretch toward the horizon. "I'm here. I won't let you go. I'll bring you back." The ground rumbled beneath her, the earth quaking as the forest fought against her words, fought against the light she was pushing out with every fiber of her being. The shadows fought back, but the light grew stronger, piercing the darkness like a blade through thick smoke. The creature that had once been Max flickered before her again, its form wavering like a reflection in shattered glass. Its eyes locked onto hers, hollow, dark, and full of something that wasn't human. The forest had twisted him into something unrecognizable, but Eva could still feel him within. Somewhere deep beneath the forest's power, Max was still there waiting. "You can't save him." The creature rasped its voice, a twisted mockery of Max's. "You're already part of the forest just like me, just like the others. You belong here." "No," Eva said, her voice fierce, the light within her flaring even brighter. "I won't let you take me. You may have taken him, but you won't take me." The creature lunged toward her, its form shifting, its mouth opening impossibly wide as it reached for her with long clawed hands. But Eva didn't hesitate. With a final desperate cry, she thrust her hands forward, unleashing the full force of the light within her. The light exploded from her, blinding and pure. It shattered the darkness, pushing the creature back with a scream that echoed through the forest. The trees groaned as the light tore through them, and the ground quaked as if the entire forest was being torn apart. For a moment, Eva felt weightless, as though the very earth had disappeared beneath her. The light swirled around her, a brilliant, blinding force, and she felt herself pulled forward toward the heart of the forest, toward Max. The light was pulling her through the darkness like a tether, a thread of hope. She fell to her knees, gasping for breath, her body trembling with the intensity of the power she had just unleashed. The light began to fade, but the forest wasn't gone. Not yet. The darkness still pressed in from all sides, clawing at her mind, at her very soul. But then, through the haze of exhaustion and fear, she felt something. A presence. Max. A figure appeared before her, shrouded in light. His form was faint at first, flickering in and out like a dream on the edge of her consciousness. But then he stepped forward, his face clearer now. His eyes were still dark, but there was something familiar, something human deep within them. "Max," Eva whispered, her voice breaking as she reached out toward him. "Max, I knew you were still in there." Max looked at her, his expression torn. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, the forest around them began to shift again. The trees groaned, their limbs cracking, and the ground beneath them shook. "You can't stay here," Max's voice said. But it wasn't his voice. It was the forest's voice, the same voice that had spoken through the creature that had once been him. "This is where you belong, Eva. You've already crossed the threshold." "No," Eva said, shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't belong here. You don't belong here, Max. You're not part of this. You're not part of the forest. I won't let it take you." Max's form flickered again, and the forest's grip on him tightened. The shadows around him grew darker, suffocating the light. Eva reached out to him, her hands shaking, but the more she tried to pull him closer, the more the darkness pushed back. "Max, please," she cried, her voice full of desperation. "I won't leave you. I'll bring you back." But Max's form shifted again, and this time, Eva knew. She knew the truth. She could feel it. The weight of the forest's power was too strong. Max was too far gone. The forest had taken him, twisted him into something else. "No." Eva whispered the word, a breath of defeat. Her hands fell to her sides, and for a moment, she felt the weight of everything, the fight, the loss, the endless struggle. The light inside her began to flicker, dimming with her hope, but then a voice. His voice. Max's voice, faint but unmistakable. "Eva." It whispered, soft and full of pain. "I love you. Don't give up. You are strong. Stronger than I ever was. The forest can't take you. Not like it took me." Eva's breath caught in her throat as the words echoed through her. Max was still in there. He was still fighting. And even though the forest had consumed him, even though it had taken everything from him, he was reaching out to her. He was still her brother. With renewed strength, Ava pushed forward, summoning every ounce of light within her, every ounce of love and defiance that she had left. She didn't care how much the forest tried to pull her in. She wouldn't let it take her. She wouldn't let it take Max. With a final desperate cry, she reached out to him, her hands glowing with a brilliance so bright it cut through the darkness like a blade. The forest screamed. Max's form flickered one last time, and then in a burst of light he was free, and with him the forest began to collapse. The light that erupted from Ava was so bright, so pure, it was as though the sun itself had risen in the middle of the forest. The shadows of the trees shrieked and recoiled from its intensity, twisting and snapping as if they couldn't bear the radiance. The very air trembled, the earth groaning under the force of it. The whispers, the voices of the lost children were drowned out, consumed by the light's overwhelming presence. Max's figure flickered one final time, and as the light surged, it consumed him, and the forest around them seemed to shudder in response. The darkness that had clung to him, that had twisted him into something unrecognizable, seemed to dissolve like smoke in the sunlight. The creature that had once been Max dissolved into the light, its form breaking apart and vanishing. Eva stood in the center of the clearing, her arms outstretched, the brilliance of the light surrounding her. Her body trembled from the intensity of the power coursing through her. She had done it. She had freed Max. The forest screamed one final time, a deafening roar that rattled the very earth beneath her feet. But it wasn't enough. The light had pushed back. The darkness had shattered its hold on this place. Slowly, the trees began to shake their twisted limbs, uncoiling their dark, gnarly forms, unwinding as the last vestiges of the forest's hold on them weakened. For a moment, everything was still. Eva's heart pounded in her chest as she stood feeling the warmth of the light fade, the brilliance dimming to a soft glow that bathed the clearing. She could hear the trees groaning in the distance, their forms shifting no longer, as twisted and unnatural as before. The air felt lighter, as if the weight of the forest's hunger had been lifted, and then through the soft rustle of the leaves she heard it. A voice. Max's voice. Eva's breath caught in her throat. She turned slowly, her eyes wide, her heart racing. There, standing in the clearing, was Max. But not the creature that had once been him. Her Max. His eyes were no longer hollow, no longer empty. They were filled with warmth, filled with life, filled with the recognition she had longed for. His face was no longer pale and twisted, but whole, free from the darkness that had once consumed him. Max, she whispered, her voice trembling as she took a hesitant step forward. Is it really you? Max smiled, his expression soft and full of love. He took a step toward her, his form steady and strong, the weight of the forest's grip finally gone from his body. It's me, Eva. I'm back. You did it. You saved me. Tears filled Eva's eyes as she ran toward him, throwing her arms around him, holding him tightly. The warmth of his body, the familiar feeling of his embrace, was all she had ever wanted. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting herself believe it was real, letting herself believe that the nightmare was finally over. Max, she whispered again, her voice breaking as she held him. I thought I lost you. Max pulled back slightly, his hands resting on her shoulders. He looked at her with a deep sadness in his eyes, but there was a tenderness there as well. You didn't lose me, Eva. I was never really gone. The forest, it was trying to take me, but you fought for me. You fought for us both. That's what saved me. Eva nodded, wiping away the tears that had streamed down her face. She didn't know how long they stood there just holding each other, but she didn't care. All that mattered was that Max was back, that the forest had been defeated, and that they were together again. But even as she held him, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. The forest wasn't gone. Not entirely. The light had broken its hold on Max, but the dark heart of the forest, the very thing that had created the terror they had faced, was still pulsing beneath the earth. Ava could feel it deep in her bones. The forest hadn't just been a place. It had been alive, a part of something older, something more dangerous than they could ever understand. Max must have sensed it too, for his grip on her tightened. "Ava," he said, his voice softer now, filled with a quiet realization. "It's not over, is it?" Ava shook her head, her expression grim. "No, it's never over. The forest is still here. It might be weak, but it's still alive. And as long as it's alive, it will keep coming for us." Max nodded, his eyes darkening as he looked around the clearing. The trees were still bent, the ground still cracked in places, the scars of the forest's power lingering. The air was still thick with the echoes of what had happened here. They weren't safe yet. "We need to leave," Eva said, her voice steady, filled with the determination that had carried her this far. "We need to go before it comes back. We need to find a way to end this for good." Max stepped back, nodding, and for the first time since this nightmare had started, he looked alive again. Not just physically, but in spirit. They had both been through hell, but they had made it out. Together, Ava turned to face the path ahead, the path that led them out of the forest, out of the darkness. She knew there would be more obstacles ahead, that the forest would not give up so easily. But for now, she had her brother back, and that was all that mattered. The forest was quiet now, as if it was holding its breath, watching them leave. And as Eva and Max began to walk side by side, the first rays of sunlight pierced the canopy above, spilling down onto the forest floor like a promise of a new beginning. They didn't know what lay ahead. They didn't know how they would face whatever remained of the forest's evil. But they knew one thing for sure. They would face it together. The forest was eerily still as Ava and Max made their way through the twisted trees, their steps soft on the damp earth. The ground beneath them seemed less oppressive, but there was an unsettling quiet hanging in the air, as though the forest was waiting, biding its time. Each step they took felt heavier, more uncertain, as though the very forest was alive and watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Ava kept her gaze fixed ahead, her heart still racing with the adrenaline of what had just happened. Max walked beside her, his presence a welcome relief, but there was a distance in his eyes, something that told her the battle wasn't over. The forest had been pushed back, but it wasn't gone. She knew that now. The darkness, the hunger was still there, somewhere in the heart of the trees. Ava Max's voice broke the silence, soft but heavy with something unspoken. "What do we do now? I'm not sure how much longer the forest will let us go. It might just be waiting for us to make a mistake." Eva's breath caught in her throat. He was right. The forest had a will of its own, and as much as it had been weakened, as much as they had fought, the forest wasn't finished with them. It was like a predator waiting to strike, just biding its time. "I don't know," Eva admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But we can't stop now. We've come too far, and I won't let it take us again. We have to find a way to end this for good." Max nodded, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. He understood the weight of the task ahead, just as she did. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about destroying the forest's hold on them, destroying it once and for all. The path ahead seemed clearer, the trees less twisted, the air less suffocating, but the closer they got to the edge of the forest, the more she could feel it, the tension in the air. The forest was watching them, the trees stretching their branches like silent sentinels, waiting for the next move. As they approached a clearing, Eva noticed something strange. The ground was uneven, as though it had been disturbed recently. The earth was cracked in places, and there was a strange, hollow echo beneath her feet. Something was wrong. Something was watching. "Max, stay close," she murmured, her voice tense with the realization. "I think it's coming." Max stepped closer, his eyes scanning the forest warily. He had always been the one to remain calm under pressure, but even he couldn't hide the fear that lingered in his expression. And then, from the center of the clearing, there was a sound. A low, rumbling growl that echoed through the trees, followed by the creaking of branches, the cracking of bark. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble again, but this time, it wasn't just the forest responding to them, it was something else. Something much darker. "It is still here," Max said quietly, his voice filled with dread. The forest hasn't fully given up. Eva felt the familiar pull of the forest's influence again. The whispers were back, their voices, a cacophony in her mind. "Come back," they whispered. "Join us. You belong here." "No," Eva whispered firmly, shaking her head as she forced herself to stand tall. She could feel the power building, the light within her flickering. It wasn't gone. "Not yet, Eva." Max's voice was strained. "I don't know how much longer I can keep it back. We need to find the heart of the forest. If we can destroy it, we can end this. We can end it for good." Eva's heart clenched at his words. The heart of the forest, the very core of its power. It was the only way. The forest's heart was where the evil had originated, where the darkness had taken root. If they could destroy it, the forest would have nothing left to feed on. But where was the heart? How could they even find it? Suddenly, the trees began to shift, moving almost imperceptibly, like they were closing in on them, pressing in from all sides. Eva's breath caught in her throat as the shadows deepened. The forest was alive, and it was suffocating them. "Max, we don't have much time," Eva said urgently. "We need to move now." Max nodded, but his gaze flickered around them, searching for something. "The heart of the forest," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Where is it?" Eva turned in a slow circle, her mind racing. She couldn't feel the heart of the forest. There was no clear direction, no obvious path to follow. But she had to feel it. She had to find it, and then a flash of light. It flickered in the distance, just beyond the trees, beyond the reach of the dark, twisted limbs. It was faint, almost imperceptible. But it was there. The light. The heart. "I see it," Eva said urgently, pointing ahead. "That way. We have to get to it." Max didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand, and together they ran. The forest seemed to fight them at every step. The branches twisted. The roots rose up from the ground to trip them, but the light in the distance kept pulling them forward, guiding them through the darkness. Eva could feel the heat of the forest's breath behind them, the pressure building as the darkness tried to consume them again. But the light was with them. It had to be enough. Finally, they reached it. The heart of the forest. It was a massive tree, taller and broader than any other, its trunk, gnarled and twisted roots, plunging deep into the earth. The light came from within its bark, glowing with a soft golden hue that contrasted sharply with the shadows around them. It pulsed with life, the heartbeat of the forest itself. Eva could feel it. The forest's power was concentrated here, but it was also where it could be destroyed. "This is it," Max said, his voice full of awe and dread. "If we destroy this, the forest will die. But we have to act fast." Eva nodded, her heart racing. She could feel the energy in the air, the tension crackling around them. The forest wouldn't give up easily, but they didn't have a choice. Together, they stepped forward, standing at the base of the massive tree. Eva closed her eyes and reached out with all the light inside her. She felt the forest's pulse, the beating heart of it. She had to strike. With everything she had, now she whispered, and with a final desperate cry, she unleashed the full force of the light within her. Ava's breath caught in her throat as she focused all of her energy into the light within her, summoning every last ounce of strength, every last piece of willpower she had. The darkness around them pressed in suffocating, but she could feel it, the heart of the forest pulsing in time with her own heartbeat. It was as if the very air was alive, heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. The light she called forth was bright, like the sun breaking through a storm, but it was fragile. It would only work if she held on, if she focused on the task at hand. She reached out her hands, trembling, and pressed her palms against the massive tree. The light exploded from her, searing, burning, as though the very earth were reacting to her touch. The forest trembled, the ground beneath her feet, cracking with the intensity of the energy that surged through the air. Max stood beside her, his eyes wide, watching in awe and fear. "Ava, you're doing it," he whispered, his voice full of wonder. But Ava didn't hear him. She couldn't. She could only feel the power of the forest surrounding her, fighting back, pushing against the light she wielded. The ground trembled as the forest seemed to resist her, its roots digging deeper into the earth, its branches reaching out like claws to drag her back into the darkness. The heart of the forest screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a pulse. A wave of raw primal energy that radiated from the core of the ancient tree, rippling through the earth and through Ava. It was the essence of the forest's power, its hunger, its desire to consume, to control. It pushed against the light, trying to choke it, to extinguish it. Ava gasped for air, her body straining under the pressure, but she refused to falter. She would not let the forest win. Not again. The light flared brighter, sharper, and for a moment everything went still. Time seemed to freeze. The air was thick with tension, a moment of pure silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then in one blinding burst, the light exploded from Ava, engulfing the tree, the forest, everything. The force of it was so strong, so intense, that it sent a shock wave through the clearing, shaking the earth beneath them. Ava stumbled backward, her arms aching from the strain, her vision blurring. But she didn't look away. She kept her eyes fixed on the heart of the forest. The tree, the heart of the forest, began to tremble. Its bark cracked, splitting down the middle, and from within, a dark energy began to bleed out like ink, spilling from an open wound. The forest groaned in agony, the shadows writhing, twisting like snakes, as the tree's power began to unravel. Max reached for her, his face a mixture of relief and awe. "Ava, it's working. We're doing it." But Ava's heart sank. She could feel it. The heart of the forest was dying, but it wasn't gone yet. There was still something left, something that refused to let go. The darkness wasn't finished with them. It wasn't finished with her. The light flickered, waning under the weight of the forest's dying resistance. Ava's knees buckled, and she collapsed to the ground, her energy depleted, her body spent. The light around her dimmed, and for a moment she feared the forest would win. But then she felt something, a presence, warm, soft. Max's hand gently touched hers. The warmth of his touch, the connection between them, it was all she needed. It was all that mattered. The light inside her flared once more, and the pulse of the heart of the forest, the pulse of darkness, flickered one final time, fading like the last breath of a dying star. The shadows around them began to recede, the pressure in the air lifting. And then with a deafening crack, the heart of the forest shattered. Ava could hear the screams of the forest echo in the distance, but they were fading, growing weaker with each passing second. The air began to clear, and the weight of the darkness was lifted. The ground beneath her feet stopped shaking, and the trees that had once leaned in so closely now stood tall and still, their twisted forms slowly returning to something more natural, more whole. Max collapsed beside her, his body trembling as the exhaustion of the ordeal took hold. but there was relief in his eyes, a quiet joy that told her what she needed to hear. They had done it. The forest's hold had been broken. We did it, Eva whispered, her voice hoarse. She looked at Max, her eyes welling with tears. We're free. Max nodded, his hand gently squeezing hers. You saved us, Eva. You saved me. Eva smiled faintly, the weight of everything they had been through finally beginning to settle in. We saved each other, she replied softly. The sun was beginning to rise, its light breaking through the canopy above them, casting golden rays on the forest floor. The forest, once dark and suffocating, now seemed to breathe with new life, the air lighter, clearer. The trees were no longer bent, their branches now reaching toward the sky in a way that felt natural, free. Eva and Max stood together side by side. The forest had been defeated, but the road ahead wasn't easy. The scars of their journey would remain, but they had survived. Together, as they walked through the clearing, leaving the forest behind, they knew their journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of peace. The forest, once alive with darkness, had been freed, and with that, Eva and Max stepped forward into the light, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that no matter what happened, they had each other. The sunlight continued to pour through the canopy above. As Eva and Max moved through the forest, the warmth of it falling gently on their faces. For the first time since they had entered the forest, the air felt clean, no longer heavy with the scent of decay and shadow. The darkness that had once clung to everything seemed to dissipate, leaving the forest in a soft, peaceful stillness. But despite the victory they had won, Eva couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else waiting, something deeper hidden beneath the surface of their triumph. The forest may have been broken, but there was an ancient energy here, an unearthed power that had only just begun to unravel. The light they had summoned had been strong enough to push the darkness back, but was it enough to keep it from ever returning? Eva glanced at Max, his expression thoughtful but tired. He had been through as much as she had, and yet even now there was a quiet strength about him, something she hadn't seen in him before. The forest had changed them both. For better or for worse, they were different now. You okay? She asked softly, reaching out to take his hand. His fingers twined with hers, warm and real, no longer cold and distant, like they had been in the grip of the forest's power. Max nodded, though his eyes were distant, still haunted by the memories of what the forest had tried to take from him. I don't know, he said quietly. I feel different. It's like the forest still lingers even though we won. I can't shake the feeling that something's still here. Eva stopped walking, her heart tightening at his words. She had felt it too, the faint pull, the low hum in the back of her mind that whispered of something still in the shadows. The forest had been the source of the darkness, but had they truly destroyed it? Or had they only weakened it? We should keep moving, she said, her voice firm with determination. The forest may be quiet for now, but we don't know what's still out there. We need to get to the edge before nightfall. Max nodded, though his expression was still troubled. Right, let's go. They continued through the forest, the path gradually opening up as they moved further from the heart of the darkness. The trees were still tall and ancient, but there was a sense of peace in the air now. The animals had returned their soft sounds of movement filling the quiet gaps. The forest had healed itself to a degree. The forest was not dead, but it was changing, evolving. As they walked, Eva couldn't help but look over her shoulder occasionally, half expecting the forest to rise up again, as if it were a living thing, waiting for the right moment to strike. But each time she turned, there was nothing but the quiet stillness of the woods. The air was clear, the trees no longer twisted and darkened by the forest's influence. Eventually, they reached the edge of the woods, the familiar boundary that led back to the world they had known. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the field that lay just beyond the trees. It was a beautiful, serene sight, the kind of peace that they had been denied for so long. But even as Eva stepped out of the forest and onto the open field, she felt the weight of it still pressing against her, lurking just beyond the horizon. The forest may have been quiet for now, but the scars it had left on them were permanent. The darkness might have been pushed back, but it had not been destroyed completely. Max stood beside her, his hand still in hers, and for a moment they just stood there, silent, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cool now, the evening breeze carrying the scent of the earth and fresh grass. The forest behind them was still its shadows creeping ever so slightly toward the edge of the clearing. Eva felt the familiar tug of the forest again deep inside her, like a distant echo of something that would never fully fade. It was as if the forest had left a piece of itself inside her. No matter how much she tried to push it away, it would always be there. The darkness had shaped them both, but it had also made them stronger. They had survived, and for that, she was thankful. "I don't think we'll ever really be free from it, will we?" Eva said softly, her voice almost lost in the wind. Max turned to her, his expression solemn but understanding. "Maybe not. The forest, it's part of us now. But we survived it, Eva. That's something. We'll find our way. Together." Eva smiled, the tears that had been threatening to fall finally slipping free, though they were tears of relief, not sorrow. Max was back. She had saved him, and together they had broken the forest's hold. There would be more struggles ahead, more challenges to face. But they had done what they thought was impossible. They had fought against the darkness and won. They turned away from the forest, their footsteps light on the soft grass. As they walked together, Eva couldn't help but feel that something had changed in the world. Something they could not yet see, but something they would understand in time. They had broken free from the forest's grip, but the world beyond was vast, unknown, and there were still so many questions left unanswered. But for the first time in a long time, Eva wasn't afraid of the unknown. She had Max beside her, and that was all that mattered. Together they would face whatever came next. The air outside the forest was different, crisp and clean with the scent of fresh grass and open skies. It was a relief, a fresh start, but Eva couldn't shake the feeling that the peace they had found was fragile. As they walked further from the darkened trees, the weight of their ordeal still clung to her, like an invisible shadow that followed them, no matter how far they went. Max seemed to feel it too. His gaze wandered back to the forest, and though he didn't speak, his thoughts were clearly with the darkness they had just escaped. "Do you think it will come back?" Eva asked softly, her voice hesitant, as if the very mention of the forest's return might summon it back into their lives. Max's expression was grim as he looked toward the horizon, where the last remnants of the sun sank beneath the hills. The world was peaceful here, but the memory of the forest of the terror and the twisted power it had held over them was hard to shake. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice low. "The forest is ancient. It has a will of its own. But maybe it's not just the forest we should be worried about. What happened there? It wasn't just some place, it was something alive, something old, something dark. And I don't think it just goes away, because we defeated it once. It will find a way back if we let our guard down." Eva swallowed hard, his words settling heavy on her chest. She had fought so hard to save him, to save herself, to push back the forest's suffocating grip. But Max was right. The forest's power wasn't just something that could be destroyed. It was part of something far older and more dangerous than they could understand. And if they weren't careful, it would rise again. "I don't think we've seen the end of it," Eva said quietly, more to herself than to Max. But if it comes back, we'll face it again. We'll find a way to stop it for good. Max turned to her, his expression softened by the bond they shared, the strength they had drawn from each other through everything they had endured. He reached for her hand, holding it gently as they continued to walk. Together, he said with a smile, the first real smile she had seen from him since they had entered the forest. We'll face it together. Eva nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. As long as she had Max by her side, they could face whatever came their way. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting the world into twilight. The sky was painted in shades of purple and gold, the stars beginning to twinkle faintly above them. Eva and Max walked in silence for a while, the peaceful night stretching out before them. As they walked through the open fields, the distant hills became a silhouette against the fading light. The world seemed vast and endless, full of possibilities. It was both terrifying and beautiful. Suddenly, Max stopped and pulled her to a halt. Eva turned to him, surprised by his sudden motion. "What is it?" she asked, looking at him curiously. Max's eyes were wide with something she couldn't place, something deeper than mere uncertainty. His gaze shifted to something far off in the distance, and Eva followed his eyes. A faint glow, a soft, shimmering light was flickering far in the distance, just beyond the hills, where the land met the edge of the forest. Eva's heart skipped a beat. That light, it wasn't natural. It wasn't the light of the stars or the moon. It was something else, something familiar. A feeling deep inside her stirred a gut instinct that sent a chill down her spine. "Max," she whispered, the hair on the back of her neck standing on end. "Do you see that?" He nodded slowly, his expression hardening as the glow grew brighter with each passing moment, as if it were drawing closer. "That light," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's not part of the forest, but it's connected to it. I can feel it. It's the same power." Eva felt a cold shiver run through her. The forest had left its mark on them. She had felt it. The light was a reminder, a calling, a reminder that the forest's influence didn't just vanish when the darkness was pushed back. Its essence lingered, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be awakened again. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice tight with fear and uncertainty. Max looked at her, his eyes steely with determination. "We go toward it. We find out what it is. And we finish what we started." Eva's heart sank. The path before them was no longer clear. They had thought they had escaped. They had thought the forest's grip was gone. But this glow, it was a sign that they hadn't fully broken free. The forest was not finished with them. Not yet. Max tightened his grip on her hand as they began walking toward the flickering light, the distance between them and it growing shorter. The air seemed to hum with energy, an unnatural stillness surrounding them as they moved toward it. With each step, the light pulsed more strongly, and Eva felt it, the faintest whisper of the forest still lingering within her mind. And as they neared the light, a dark thought crossed her mind. If the forest still lived, what would it ask of them next? Eva and Max pressed on toward the distant glow, the soft light pulsing faintly in the distance, growing brighter as they drew closer. The air around them was thick with an almost tangible energy, as if the very world was holding its breath, waiting for something. The ground beneath their feet seemed to hum, resonating with a strange frequency that matched the pulsing light. Every step felt more weighted than the last, the uncertainty settling deeper in their chests. Max's grip on Eva's hand tightened, his eyes scanning the landscape ahead. His expression was a mix of caution and resolve. "I don't know what this is, Eva," he said quietly, his voice low and cautious. "But I feel it. The forest's power, it's still here. This light, it's connected to it. Eva nodded, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. The light wasn't like anything they had encountered before. It wasn't warm or comforting, but rather unsettling, like it was waiting for them, calling them, as if it had been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself to pull them back in. With each step, the glow grew stronger, its intensity casting an eerie light across the land, illuminating the terrain before them. The peaceful fields they had walked through began to shift the grass, darkening and curling, like tendrils, the flowers wilting as if in response to the approaching force. The world around them seemed to warp the air, growing heavier. Max pulled her closer, his steps quickening. "We need to get to it," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Whatever it is, it's not just a light. It's something much darker." Eva's heart raced. She could feel it now, too, the power that was emanating from the light. It wasn't natural. It was a pull, a magnetic force that tugged at her very soul. The forest had left its mark on them, and now this light, whatever it was the next phase of its grip. The clearing ahead opened up, and Ava's breath caught in her throat. The source of the light was now clear, its intensity blinding. The soft glow emanated from an ancient stone structure, rising from the ground like an altar, tall, dark, and crowned with vines. The stone was covered in strange symbols worn by time, but still glowing with an unnatural light. The very earth around it seemed to pulse with energy, the ground beneath them trembling ever so slightly. "This," Max whispered, his voice full of awe and fear. "This isn't just any ruin. This is something ancient, a part of the forest itself. A conduit." Eva stepped forward slowly, drawn to the stone structure, as if by an invisible force. The closer they got, the stronger the pull became, as if the very ground was alive with energy. Her chest tightened, and the whispers of the lost souls, the cries for help from the forest, began to return. They were faint, barely audible, but they were there, lingering like the last remnants of a nightmare that refused to end. "No," Eva muttered under her breath, shaking her head. "This can't be what I think it is. It's too familiar." Max turned to her, his face pale, his eyes wide with realization. "Ava, don't." But it was too late. Eva reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against the cold stone. The moment her skin touched it, the light flared a sharp, blinding flash that filled the air with an overwhelming force. The ground beneath them cracked open, sending a shockwave through the clearing, and the air was filled with a deafening roar, like the sound of an ancient beast waking from a long slumber. Max shouted in warning, but the words were lost in the cacophony of the roar. The world around them spun the light from the structure, blinding, distorting their vision. Eva could feel herself being pulled into it, as if the very earth was dragging her toward the stone. She stumbled, falling forward, but Max caught her arm, pulling her back. "We have to get out of here," Max shouted, his voice hoarse, filled with desperation. But Eva couldn't tear her eyes away from the structure, the pulsing light, the whispers that were now filling her mind louder than ever before. The stone began to crack, fissures appearing in its surface, and the symbols on it began to glow with an eerie blue light. The energy surrounding it surged, an unholy force, and Ava realized with a sickening sense of dread what was happening. The forest wasn't just some place, it was alive, a creature, a force of nature that had become self-aware, and the stone in front of her was its heart, its conduit, the very thing that had anchored the forest's power. "No," Eva whispered as the realization hit her. "This is the source. This is where it all began. The forest was born from this." Max's grip on her arm tightened, his eyes filled with fear. "We need to destroy it, Eva. We have to break it before it takes us." Eva shook her head. "It's too late. It's alive. It's been waiting for us to come back. The structure before them began to pulse again, its energy growing stronger, the ground trembling beneath them. It was as if the forest was feeding on them, drawing their life force into the stone, trying to bind them to it. The light from the structure flared again, brighter this time, almost blinding. Ava could feel the forest's heartbeat in her chest, matching her own. The energy inside the stone, inside the heart of the forest, was becoming them. Their lives, their souls, were being pulled into it, drawn into the very power that had claimed so many before them. "Max," Ava whispered, her voice trembling. "We have to stop this. We can't let it take us." Max nodded, his face pale, his eyes full of determination. "Together, we can do it." Ava took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had already summoned the light once. She had already defeated the forest's hold on her, on Max. And now she would do it again. They would fight to the very end. She closed her eyes, focused, and felt the light within her flare again. It wasn't just the forest's darkness that she fought. It was everything, the will of the land, the very force that had corrupted the world around them. She wasn't fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting to end it. With a final cry, she summoned the light with every last ounce of strength in her being, and the ground beneath them cracked wide open, the very heart of the forest shattering into pieces. The ground beneath Eva's feet cracked open with a violent rumble, the earth splitting wide as her light flared brighter than ever before. The force of it was blinding, the raw energy pouring from her like a torrent, bursting from within her chest. She could feel it, the very pulse of the forest, the dark, ancient power of the stone pushing back against her. But she wouldn't relent. She couldn't. The stone structure before them trembled, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface as the energy she summoned collided with it, splintering the symbols etched into its ancient face. The air was thick with power, the sound of the forest's roar ringing in her ears as if it were protesting, crying out in anger. Ava Max shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening noise of the cracking earth. He reached out for her, but the force of the light was too strong, pushing him back, as though the energy was too much for both of them to handle at once. Ava's heart pounded, her body trembling with the strain of holding the light together, channeling every ounce of her will into the explosion of pure energy. She could feel herself faltering, the edges of her vision blurring, but she wasn't about to stop. She couldn't. Not now. "Max," she whispered, barely able to catch her breath as her body threatened to collapse under the pressure. "Help me." Max, though pushed back by the force of the energy, didn't hesitate. He stumbled forward, his face grim but resolute. His eyes locked with hers as he stepped into the pulse of light, feeling its strength, its heat, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he placed his hands over hers, gripping them tightly as he joined her, sharing the burden of the light. "I'm here," he said, his voice steady but strained. "Together. We can do this." The connection between them was instant. The bond they shared, broken only by the forest's grip, reigniting as they stood side by side. Ava could feel the strength of Max flowing into her, grounding, her helping her push back against the overwhelming force of the forest. Together, they were strong. The pulse of light grew more intense, and with each heartbeat the stone before them cracked further, its dark power receding. The energy from the stone, that ancient suffocating force, began to unravel the light from their combined strength, burning away the darkness, tearing it apart like paper in a flame. But even as the stone began to crack, the forest fought back. The trees groaned in agony, their bark peeling away the earth beneath them, heaving in protest. A final deafening roar came from deep within the forest, a cry of despair, but also of defiance. The forest would not give up without a fight. "No," Ava screamed, pushing herself further. the light now a blinding beacon tearing at the very fabric of the forest's power. The stone shuddered violently, cracking open like the heart of the forest itself was being torn apart. Max's grip on her tightened as he too pushed with all his might. "We will end this," he said, his voice full of resolve. "We will take its heart." With one final burst of energy, Eva and Max unleashed the full force of the light, the brightness blinding everything in its path. For a moment, the world around them was nothing but light, nothing but searing brilliance. And then everything stopped. The earth stilled. The air cleared. Eva opened her eyes slowly, blinking away the spots from the explosion of light. She felt the familiar weight of Max's hand in hers, but there was something different now. The darkness had retreated. The forest was quiet. The heart of the forest, the stone had shattered completely, the pieces crumbling away into dust, scattered by the wind. The power that had held the forest alive, the ancient malevolent force that had fed on fear and darkness, had been broken. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air was still. No whispers, no distant cries, just the quiet hum of life returning. Max stood beside her, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his face was free. There was no shadow in his eyes, no trace of the forest's hold. I think we did it," Eva said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't believe it. It was over. It was really over. The forest had been destroyed. The darkness had been banished. Max looked at her, his face softening, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think we did." But even as they stood there surrounded by the calm that followed their victory, Eva couldn't shake the lingering feeling, the knowledge that the forest had not just been a physical place, but a force, a power that had touched everything. It had shaped them both in ways they would never truly be able to understand. And as much as they had broken its hold, there would always be a part of them that would carry the mark of what had happened here. The world had changed, and they had changed with it. They had learned that darkness, no matter how deep, could always be fought. But the scars would remain. Max reached for her, his hand gently brushing against hers as he pulled her close. She leaned into him, her eyes closing as she let the reality of their victory wash over her. The forest was no longer a place of fear. It was no longer a place of darkness. It was gone, reduced to memories, to ashes. But as she stood there in the quiet, the world finally at peace, Eva knew that their journey wasn't over. The world was wide, and it was filled with new paths, new challenges, and new stories waiting to be written. And no matter what came next, they would face it together. Eva and Max stood there in the clearing, their bodies exhausted, but their spirits oddly light, as if the weight of the forest's influence had finally lifted from their shoulders. The last remnants of the dark energy that had plagued them seemed to vanish with the collapse of the stone, leaving behind a strange, quiet calm. But even in this stillness, Eva could feel a lingering presence, a hollow whisper that tugged at her mind, urging her to look deeper, to question what they had just accomplished. The forest was gone. It was no longer a looming threat, no longer suffocating their every breath. But the feeling of unfinished business, of something unresolved, still lingered like the scent of smoke after a fire. "We did it," Eva said again, her voice quiet as she glanced at Max, her heart still beating fast in her chest. "It's really over." Max met her gaze, his expression weary but genuine, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "It's over, Eva. For now, at least. We've beaten the heart of the forest, and that means we can finally move forward." He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch warm and reassuring. "You've done something incredible. We've both done something incredible." Eva smiled faintly, her thoughts drifting to all the struggles they'd faced, the countless moments of doubt when she thought they wouldn't make it. Yet here they were still standing. The forest was gone, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of it all settle deep in her bones. She could feel the forest's final pulse deep within the earth beneath her feet. It had retreated, yes, but a part of it still lingered like a shadow fading from the light. And as much as she wanted to believe that they had completely won, that they had severed the forest's connection to their world, there was still a question, an uncertainty at the edge of her mind. Max must have sensed her hesitation. He lowered his hands from her face, his expression growing more serious. "What's wrong?" Eva hesitated, taking a slow breath before speaking. "Max, I know we've defeated the heart of the forest, but the energy, the darkness, it's still here somewhere. I feel it. Do you?" Max's eyes darkened slightly, a flicker of concern flashing across his face. "I do. It's like a thread, a connection that's still there. It's faint, almost imperceptible, but it's not gone. It's waiting." Eva nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle heavily in her chest. The forest had been powerful too, powerful to just vanish without a trace. It wasn't over, not completely. There were pieces of it that still lingered in the world, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be uncovered. Max stepped closer, his gaze steady, his hand gently gripping her shoulder. "What do we do now? The heart of the forest is gone. Whatever remains of it is weaker. But I agree with you. There's still something alive." Eva met his eyes, her own resolve strengthening. "We need to find it. We need to trace the source of it and destroy it once and for all. We can't leave any piece of it standing. It's too dangerous." Max's jaw tightened, but he didn't hesitate. "You're right. If we don't finish this now, it'll keep coming back. It might take time, but it will find a way." Eva nodded again, feeling the heavy weight of their decision. There would be no return to normalcy, no simple resolution. The forest had changed them, shaped them in ways they couldn't yet fully understand. And as long as that shadow, whatever was left of the forest's influence, still clung to the world, they had to finish it. The quiet stillness of the clearing, once soothing, now felt like an uneasy lull before the storm. They couldn't rest. Not yet. With a deep breath, Eva turned her gaze back toward the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. It had been a long, hard journey to this point, but there was no turning back now. She could feel the forest's dark tendrils reaching out, trying to draw her back into its grip, but she wouldn't let it. Not again. "We have to go deeper," she said, her voice steady, even though the weight of uncertainty pressed on her chest. "We need to find the source. Whatever's left of the forest's power is buried deep in the world. We'll track it down, and we'll destroy it." Max nodded, his resolve matching hers. "We'll finish this. We'll make sure it's gone for good." And so, without another word, they turned back toward the woods. This time, they weren't just walking into the unknown. This time, they were determined to finish the fight that had begun so long ago. The forest had claimed so much of their lives already, but they were ready to take back what was theirs. They didn't know how long the journey would take, or what they would find along the way. But Eva and Max were stronger now, bound by their shared experience, their shared fight. Together, they would confront the dark remnants of the forest, and whatever it had left hidden in its depths, and they would not stop until it was truly finished. The air was thick with tension as Eva and Max ventured back into the depths of the forest. The landscape had changed since they first entered. The once oppressive darkness had lightened, but the silence remained heavy. The forest, though no longer the malicious force it once was, still held a presence, an ancient lingering weight that clung to everything. The forest wasn't gone. Not yet. And as they moved deeper into its heart, the echoes of their past struggles seemed to resonate from the trees, from the very earth beneath their feet. It felt like the land was holding its breath, as if waiting for them to uncover the truth. Eva's mind raced, the uncertainty gnawing at her as she glanced at Max, his steps quiet but determined. His face, though tired, held an unyielding resolve. They had come so far, yet there was still something pulling them forward, something deeper than just the forest itself. Whatever remained of the forest's power had a way of calling them back. "You're sure about this?" Max's voice broke the silence, his tone steady, but with a quiet undertone of concern. "We've come a long way, but whatever is left here, it doesn't feel like it's over." Ava knotted her grip on the light that had once surged through her still firm, a faint glow lingering in her palm. "I don't think it's finished. The heart of the forest was broken, yes, but there's something else. I can feel it deep inside. There's more to this place, something older than we've seen. We have to find it and destroy it." Max sighed, his eyes scanning the surroundings as they pressed forward. "I don't like this. The deeper we go, the more it feels like we're walking into something we can't fully understand." Ava smiled faintly, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll figure it out. We always have." But even as she said the words, she wasn't entirely sure. The deeper they went, the more it felt like they were crossing a line, one they couldn't return from. It was like the forest was folding in on them, its dark past rising from the depths of the earth, unwilling to stay buried. As they walked deeper, the forest grew denser, the trees taller, their branches twisting into strange, unnatural shapes. The shadows grew longer, the ground beneath them softer, more uneven. The hum of the air, the strange pull that had tugged at them earlier, became louder, more pronounced. It was like the forest was pulling them towards something, the heart of its ancient power. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted. The trees parted to reveal a clearing Eva and Max had not seen before, despite their many travels through this cursed land. In the center of the clearing stood an altar-like structure, towering and ancient, made from massive stones. The symbols etched into the stones were worn, faded by time, but they still glowed faintly with an eerie blue light. Ava stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't just any place. This was the true heart of the forest, the origin of its power. The altar, the structure. It was as old as the forest itself, a conduit for the ancient energy that had given the forest life, feeding it with power, darkness, and corruption. Max turned to her, his face pale. "Ava, this is it, isn't it?" Ava nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the altar. "It's not just the forest we have to destroy, Max. It's this altar. It's the source of everything. The forest's power, its hold on us, it all comes from here." Max looked around nervously, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of the stone structure. "Then, we need to destroy it. Once and for all." Ava stepped forward, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had to do. The forest had been part of her for so long, its influence, its whispers. But she couldn't allow it to consume any more lives. The power that had once been wielded by the forest was bound to this altar, and if they didn't destroy it, they risked allowing the darkness to rise again. As they approached the altar, the light from the symbols grew brighter, casting strange shadows around them. The air felt thick, heavy with energy, and Eva could almost taste the power in the air, the same force that had twisted the forest and everything within it. Max's hand found hers again, gripping it tightly. "We're in this together," he said quietly, his voice steady. "No matter what happens," Ava nodded, squeezing his hand in return. Together, with a deep breath, Eva stepped forward and placed her palm against one of the stones of the altar. The moment she touched it, the ground beneath them trembled, and a violent pulse of energy shot up through the altar, racing through the air like lightning. The air turned cold, and the forest seemed to whisper in a voice that was not its own. "You cannot destroy what is already part of you." The voice echoed deep and haunting, the words reverberating in Ava's bones. "You belong to us. You will always belong to the forest." Ava's pulse quickened, and she pulled her hand back, her breath shallow. The voice was so familiar, so wrong, like the forest itself had a consciousness, a will. A voice that had always been waiting for them. She could feel it. Its hunger. Its pull. Its need to consume them. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Max stepped beside her, his hand once again finding hers. "We've come too far," he said, his voice fierce. "We're not turning back now." Eva nodded, feeling the light in her flare again, pushing against the dark presence that pressed in from all sides. This time, they would finish it. This time, the forest's power would be eradicated once and for all. She closed her eyes, focusing on the light that had burned so brightly within her during their battles. With a cry, she released it all, every ounce of the energy she had left, aiming it directly at the altar. The light tore through the air, blasting the stone with a deafening crack. The forest screamed. The altar shuddered, its stones cracking apart, the symbols glowing brightly for a brief moment before shattering. A wave of energy pulsed outward, the light burning away the shadows that had clung to the forest for centuries. The trees around them trembled, their branches cracking, but the air was clear. The darkness that had once consumed it, now dissipating like smoke. And then everything went still. Ava opened her eyes, her breath shallow, her body exhausted. The altar was gone, reduced to rubble. The power that had fueled the forest's darkness destroyed. The world around them seemed to take a breath, the air lighter. The trees standing tall, no longer twisted, no longer suffocating. Max stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "Is it over?" Ava glanced around, feeling the weight lift from the world. "I think so," she whispered. But even as she said the words, she knew that the forest would never fully be gone, not from the world, not from their hearts. Its mark had been left on them both, shaping them in ways they would never fully understand. But it was over. The forest's grip had been shattered. Together they had faced it, and together they had won. Ava and Max stood in the clearing, the remnants of the altar still smoking, pieces of shattered stone scattered around them like forgotten memories. The air was lighter now, but the stillness felt fragile, like a fragile calm before a storm. They had fought so hard, so desperately to free themselves from the forest's grasp, and now they stood at the threshold of something new. But there was no sense of triumph, not yet. The weight of what they had just done hung heavily in the air. The forest around them was silent. The trees, once twisted and darkened, now stood straight and tall, their bark no longer gnarled, but smooth, almost pristine. The ground, which had once felt oppressive and alive with dark energy, was now quiet, barely even a whisper. But the quiet wasn't peaceful. Eva felt it. The absence of the forest's voice, the forest's pulse. It had been such a constant part of her life, both in the background and at the forefront. For years, it had shaped the way she thought, the way she saw the world. She didn't know if she was ready for the silence it had left behind. Max, sensing the same unease, reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Is it really over?" he asked, his voice quiet, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace that had descended around them. Eva closed her eyes, feeling the lingering threads of the forest's power deep inside her, hidden beneath layers of light and struggle. The energy that had coursed through her, that had brought her to this point, still flickered faint, but there. She wasn't sure if it would ever leave her completely. But the forest, the heart had been destroyed. The altar was gone. The forest's grip had finally loosened, but there were still whispers, faint, quiet echoes. She couldn't tell if they were the remnants of the forest's power, or just the fear and doubt creeping in, trying to convince her that the battle wasn't truly over. She could feel Max's presence next to her, his warmth grounding her. She wasn't alone. She hadn't been alone throughout this entire journey. No, she said, her voice steady now. I think we've done it. It's over. But even as she spoke those words, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of her mind. It wasn't about the forest anymore. It wasn't about the ancient power they had just defeated. It was something else. The forest might be gone, but the world had changed. They had changed. Max squeezed her hand, pulling her from her thoughts. So what now? His eyes searched hers, a flicker of something deeper in them. What happens to us? What happens to the world? Eva felt the weight of those questions settle on her chest, heavier than anything the forest could ever impose. What did happen now? The darkness they had faced was gone, but the scars it left behind those were still very real. I don't know. She said, a quiet laugh escaping her as she looked out at the open sky, the stars now twinkling softly above them. But I know we can face it. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Max nodded, his expression softening. Together. They stood there for a long moment, simply being the night settling around them like a blanket. The forest had given them no easy path, but in the end, it had led them to this moment, the moment where they stood free. Whatever new challenges awaited them, whatever the future held, they knew they would face it side by side. And then, just as they began to turn away, a flicker of light caught Ava's eye. She turned back, narrowing her gaze to the place where the altar had been. The light wasn't the eerie glow of the forest's energy. It was something different, something more familiar. It was soft, gentle, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkest night. Without thinking, she started walking toward it, Max at her side. As they approached, the light began to grow pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat. But unlike before, it wasn't cold. It was warm, calming, and full of potential. The closer they got, the more it felt like an invitation, something that had been waiting for them to arrive. And then Ava saw it, a stone not like the altar, but simple, smooth, glowing faintly with an inner warmth. It wasn't a structure meant for power. It was a stone of remembrance, a marker of all that had happened, a symbol of the forest's journey from darkness to light. And at its center, an inscription etched softly in a language she didn't recognize. She bent down her fingers, lightly tracing the markings. As soon as her touch met the stone, the glow intensified, and the inscription shifted. She gasped as the words suddenly came to her clear as day. From the roots of the forest we are born. From the light of the stars we are reborn. Always we evolve. Always we grow. What was once lost shall be found, but only when the heart is healed. Max stepped forward, looking over her shoulder, his voice filled with awe. What does it mean? Eva didn't know. The words felt ancient, timeless, and they resonated deep within her, echoing the journey she and Max had taken. The forest had been reborn, and so had they. I think it means we're not done yet, she said softly, her voice filled with the weight of that realization. The forest has always been here, and it will continue to evolve, continue to grow. But this time, it's different. Max remained quiet for a moment before giving a soft nod, as if accepting the weight of the unknown. Then we'll be ready. We'll face whatever comes next. Together, Ava stood up, brushing the dirt from her hands, a sense of peace washing over her. The stone, the words, it was all a reminder that the forest's journey was far from over. But they had started something. They had broken the chains that had held them captive for so long. Now it was up to them to ensure the forest's path remained one of light growth and freedom. Together, Ava repeated, her voice steady, her gaze focused on the horizon. We'll face it all. Max smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Eva felt a true sense of peace. Whatever the future held, she knew they had what it took to face it. They had survived the forest's dark embrace, and now they would thrive in the light. And so they walked forward into the future, ready for whatever the world had in store for them, knowing they would face it side by side, forever changed, but never broken. The days that followed were quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed too peaceful after the storm they had weathered. Ava and Max spent their time walking through the lands they had once feared, the remnants of the forest still there, but no longer oppressive, no longer dark. The earth beneath their feet felt solid, the trees around them standing tall and free, no longer twisted by the grip of the ancient power that had once consumed them. It was as if the world had taken a deep breath and exhaled, and now all was calm. But there was still something in the air, an uneasy peace. The remnants of the forest's influence lingered not in the trees or the earth, but in their hearts and minds. The journey had changed them both, marking them in ways they couldn't quite understand, and there was still the question of what came next. They had defeated the heart of the forest, broken its power, and freed themselves from its grasp. But something in Ava's heart told her that there was more to discover, more to understand about the world they had saved and the forces they had unleashed. They had destroyed the darkness, but had they truly healed everything it had touched? Max seemed to sense it too. He had become quieter in the days that followed, his eyes often far away, lost in thought. Eva knew he was processing everything they had endured. The forest had changed him, shaped him in ways he would carry for the rest of his life. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the sky with soft hues of pink and gold, they sat on the edge of a meadow overlooking the vast open expanse of the land. The air was cool, the wind soft, and for a moment, everything felt right. But the stillness didn't last long. I don't think we're done yet, Max said, suddenly his voice low, breaking the peaceful silence between them. Eva turned to him, her heart skipping a beat. What do you mean? Max looked out over the meadow, his gaze distant, focused on something far off, something only he could see. The forest is gone. The altar is destroyed. But it doesn't feel like everything has been completely healed. There's still something out there, something that hasn't fully been finished. Eva's pulse quickened. She had felt it too, that tug in the back of her mind, that sensation that they hadn't uncovered all the forest's secrets. Even after everything they had done, she felt the flicker of something still unresolved, like a door left slightly ajar. Do you think the forest will come back? She asked quietly, almost afraid to voice her fear. Or that something else? More is waiting. Max exhaled, his breath heavy, the weight of his words pressing down on her. I don't know, but I feel like we've only seen the surface. What we destroyed was just the heart, but what was beneath the heart? What if the forest was never just the trees, the roots, the altar? What if it was something older, deeper? Ava stared at him for a long moment, the quiet beauty of the world around them, now clouded by his words. The forest had always felt ancient, powerful, untouchable, but had they truly understood it? Had they destroyed the true source of its power, or had they simply driven it into hiding, pushed it down deeper where they couldn't reach? Max turned to her, his eyes full of a quiet urgency. Ava, we need to keep looking. We need to understand the forest. It's not just about defeating it. It's about understanding why it existed in the first place, why it had that kind of power. There's something we haven't learned, something we need to uncover. Ava nodded slowly, her heart thudding in her chest. She knew what he was saying. She had felt it too. The forest had not been just a place of darkness. It had been a living, breathing force that had shaped everything around it. And as much as they had fought to destroy it, to break its hold, there was a part of her that wondered if it was part of a greater balance, a cycle they had yet to understand. What if we're wrong? She asked softly, the weight of the question hanging in the air. What if we were part of the reason the forest existed? Maybe it wasn't just something we had to defeat. Maybe we were always meant to face it. Maybe we were part of its story. Max's eyes softened, and he reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. I don't know, Eva, but I do know that we have to find out. I don't think we're finished here. Not yet. Eva looked into his eyes, her resolve hardening. She had been through so much to bring them here, to free them from the forest's grip, but the journey had changed her. She wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. Whatever came next, whatever shadows still lingered in the corners of their world, she would face it. They would face it. Together, we'll find the answers, she said firmly. We'll discover what's been left behind and understand what we couldn't before. Max nodded, a small but determined smile forming on his lips. Together, and as they stood up, ready to continue the journey that they both knew wasn't truly over the last rays of the setting sun, bathed them in its warm light. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with questions they couldn't yet answer. But for the first time since they had stepped foot in the forest all those months ago, Eva felt a sense of peace. The forest had shaped their lives in ways they couldn't yet fully grasp, but they had survived. And now it was time to move forward into the unknown toward the new life that awaited them. No matter what came next, they would be ready. The weeks that followed their conversation under the setting sun were filled with an unexpected sense of urgency. Ava and Max had made the decision to continue their journey into the unknown, to seek the answers they both felt were still out there. It wasn't just about the forest anymore. It was about understanding what lay beneath it, the origins of its power, why it had drawn them in, and what had happened to the balance of the world when they had shattered its heart. They traveled through familiar lands, fields, forests, mountains, always searching, always seeking something that could tell them what had gone wrong. But no matter where they went, there was an emptiness in the air, a sense that something was missing. The world had changed, but neither of them could say for certain whether it had changed for better or for worse. The peace they had fought for felt fragile, as if the forces that had shaped the forest had only been dormant, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Every time they approached a new place, Eva felt it, the faint stirrings of energy beneath her feet, a pulse in the ground that was almost imperceptible but unmistakable. It was the same feeling she had felt before, that deep connection to the forest, to the land, to the ancient power that had driven them both to this point. But now, the pulse was quieter, gentler, like it was biding its time, waiting. One evening, as they camped beneath a sky full of stars, Max sat beside Ava, his eyes gazing into the fire they had built. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of something deeper in his gaze, an understanding perhaps that had settled in the aftermath of their victory. "Do you ever wonder if the forest was always meant to be this way?" Max asked, breaking the silence between them. His voice was quiet, introspective. Ava turned to him, her hand absently tracing patterns in the dirt. She knew what he meant. She had wondered the same thing. The forest had been a living, breathing entity, a force of nature, with a power that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. And yet it hadn't always been like that. At one point, it had been a natural part of the world, a force that had once shaped the land, but now it had twisted and turned into something else, something darker. "I've wondered that too," she replied, her voice soft, thoughtful. "The forest, it was always powerful, but when did it become corrupted? When did it begin to consume everything around it? Was it always a part of the world's balance, or was it something that went wrong? Over time, I feel like there's more to this than we understand." Max sighed, running a hand through his hair, his gaze distant. "It's hard to say. But what if it wasn't just the forest we were meant to fight? What if there's something else, something larger, something that created the forest in the first place? What if we only touched the surface of a much bigger problem?" Eva's mind whirred with the possibilities. What if Max was right? What if the forest had merely been the symptom of a greater imbalance, something far older than the trees, older than the altar, older than the power they had destroyed? What if they had only dealt with a small fraction of a much deeper, darker force? But even as she considered this, she felt a flicker of hope. They had defeated the heart of the forest. They had faced the darkness and survived. They had freed themselves from its grip, and for now, that was enough. "We can't answer everything right now," she said, her voice steady, yet filled with quiet determination. "But we've made it this far. We've destroyed the core of the forest's power. The rest will come in time. We just have to keep moving forward, keep searching for answers." Max smiled faintly, his hand reaching over to take hers, a gesture of comfort and shared resolve. "We always do." The fire crackled between them, the flickering light casting shadows around their campsite. For the first time in a long while, Eva felt a true sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead was still uncertain, still filled with questions, but she and Max had faced unimaginable darkness and survived. They had broken free, and no matter what came next, they would face it together. As they sat in the quiet of the night, a thought drifted through Ava's mind, one that had been with her since the moment they had decided to continue their journey. The world had been shaken, yes. The forest's hold had been broken. But perhaps in the end, their fight wasn't just about the forest. It was about something deeper, something that couldn't be destroyed by light or darkness alone. It was about balance, about understanding the forces that shaped the world and how they connected. And they would continue ever forward to find the answers. In the stillness of the night, Eva made a silent promise to herself and to Max. They would uncover the truth. They would find out why the forest had been born, why it had grown, and why it had twisted into the dark force it had become. But most of all, they would keep fighting to ensure that this world they had saved, would never be consumed again. The sun dipped below the hills, casting a golden hue over the vast expanse before them. Eva and Max stood side by side, watching the horizon where the last rays of light kissed the earth, painting the world in soft shades of pink and orange. The world around them felt peaceful, serene, different from the darkness and the chaos they had left behind in the forest. But despite the calm, neither of them could ignore the weight of what had happened and the uncertainty of what still lay ahead. They had destroyed the heart of the forest, broken its power, freed themselves from its hold. But the questions remained. Had they truly ended the forest's influence? Or had they simply pushed it into hiding, waiting for a new moment to return? The peace they had fought for felt fragile, and the silence in the air was both soothing and unsettling. Max looked over at Eva, his expression thoughtful. You know, for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like we're being hunted. But it still doesn't feel over, does it? Eva turned to him, meeting his gaze. There was a quiet understanding between them, a shared sense of not having finished everything. The forest, its power, its darkness, it had shaped so much of their lives. But even though they had broken its hold, the memory of it lingered like a shadow they couldn't quite shake. No, she said softly, her voice steady. It's not over. But we've taken the first step. We've freed ourselves from its grip. The rest, well, we'll figure it out. Max nodded, squeezing her hand, a silent promise between them. Together, he said the word, filled with strength, determination, and the bond they had formed through everything. They stood in silence for a while, the cool evening breeze brushing past them, the last whispers of the forest fading into the distance. The forest was behind them, and yet the feeling of something unresolved, something still pulling at the edges of their minds, remained. We can't keep running from it, Max said quietly, his voice almost a whisper against the vastness of the open world. Whatever remains of the forest's power, it's not gone, and we can't just ignore it. We need to know what it truly was, why it had such power over us, why it had such a hold on the land. Eva glanced at him, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. We've already done so much. We've fought to free ourselves from the darkness. But you're right. There's more to this. We'll find out the truth. We'll uncover what the forest really was and why it tried to consume everything. Max turned to face her fully, his eyes steady and resolute. We'll do it together, no matter what comes next. Eva smiled softly, feeling the strength of their bond, of everything they had endured and survived. They had come so far, but the road ahead was still uncertain. The forest had shaped them, but it would not define them. Together they walked away from the hill, leaving behind the place where the forest's heart had once beaten, where its power had once ruled. The world before them was wide and its future uncertain, but they were no longer afraid. They had faced the darkness, and they had survived. They had broken free, and now they would face whatever came next together,